Council, come to order. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mandy, would you please call the roll?
DeYoung.
Here.
Vanderhorst.
Here.
Butler.
Here.
Carlson.
Here.
Hopkins.
Here.
Van Frylen.
Here.
Can I get a motion for approval of the tentative agenda?
Support.
Is that Hopkins and Carlstone or the other way around?
Yes.
Okay. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor, please say yes. Opposed, no. Mandy, please call the roll.
Hopkins.
Yes.
Carlson.
Yes.
Van Frylen.
Yes.
DeYoung.
Yes.
Vanderhorst.
Yes.
Butler.
Yes. Yes.
Motion passed. This time, we have opportunity for public forum. Anyone wishing to address council regarding anything on the agenda, please, I think last night we don't have a microphone. Oh, we got the podium, all right. So if you want to make a comment about anything that's on the agenda, come to the podium, state your name and address, and please limit your comments to 3 minutes. All right, we'll continue with our budget and have a lot of utility information this evening. So, Mike, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, I believe the first complete loss for the city. But as you can see, we actually have a 3.5% decrease in expenditures. So Mandy, let's go ahead to the capital improvement program. And I'd like to turn the floor over to our electric director, Nate Spurgeon, to talk about the proposed CIP for the electric utility. And particular, Nate, I'd like to talk about the North Plant to East Sub Bus tie, the importance of that project, as well as AMI, and I'll also chime in on AMI as well. But before we do this, if you'd please introduce our new electric distribution superintendent, Nate.
Sure. Brought to the table Mr. Luke Rolfe. Luke joined us, it's been 4 years ago since he joined the utility, I believe, and he became distribution superintendent of November of 2022. All right. Yep. And Luke's been doing a bang-up job getting the crew rolling and getting projects under their belt and keeping them super busy. So Luke's going to talk about some of his contributions to this budget here.
I want to ask one question before you dive into this. You know this electric department better than anybody that's walking the face of the earth. What do you attribute the lower load requirement to?
Well, I think we've projected more growth than what we're seeing. We've seen lots of developments coming online. We have the whole Prairie Ridge, but we have 60 houses built out there, and those just aren't contributing to our sales like we thought we would. What we're seeing happening is the continued increase in using of energy efficient products in people's homes. And the big key thing there is lighting, and not just homes, but businesses. It's interesting to see Pella Corporation, they've taken advantage of several of our energy efficiency rebates that we've offered through Missouri River. Their load over the last 10 years has gone from 10 megawatts to about 6 megawatts peak. So they have cut their load big time, and we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars of sales just in that. So we've kind of shot ourselves in the foot a little bit, but we've also lowered our own cost to purchase the power.
All right, thanks.
Mike wanted to talk about the East Sub bus tie we've got. These first three line items on our CIP budget, the North Plant to East Sub bus tie. I don't know if you guys noticed over the last summer and then even the fall before that, we've been digging along Vermeer Road. We've been putting in 12 pipes of duct bank and in some instances a little bit more. We're doing that with an open cut, crossing streets, cutting concrete out, replacing concrete, because we're going to put a heavy circuit tie between the North Platte substation, which is just north of where the old power line used to be. It's going to run up East First Street where we already have an existing duct bank, and then it's going to head east once it gets up to Franklin and Washington Street. Then it's going to go down our new duct bank down Vermeer Road that we're building now, and it's going to be a double circuit, heavy cable, so that we can back up Vermeer substation should we have a tornado incident or a disaster or something happens on the 69 transmission line, which we don't even own. It's owned by Central Iowa Power Cooperative. We're just kind of, the Vermeer substation is kind of islanded out there. So the project that we've built the duct bank on was already completed in previous years. This bus tie is mainly a cable purchase, a little bit of equipment. So we're going to do the installation and the termination and the splicing of that cable. And then along with that, we're going to take a lot of the residences and businesses going down Vermeer Road and put them underground. And we're going to utilize that same duct bank that we've been building to do that. And that's increased reliability and serviceability of Vermeer manufacturing. There's a couple of critical circuit ties out there. In 27, we'll get more in details on that in future years, but it essentially just picks up some of our heavier circuits that we built in the past 5 to 10 years and refeeds or gives alternate feeds of those toward the center of town so that we can have more better reliability in downtown areas. I'll let Luke talk a little bit about the Idaho Drive underground conversion. The line item that we're seeing right there is for cable and equipment purchases. Luke's been leading the charge with our contractor on that, and he'll give a little update on that.
So for the Idaho Drive underground conversion, we currently have a contractor in town doing work from the sewer treatment plant or water treatment plant to the south entrance of Boss Landon, and they are currently installing conduit all along there to people's homes and businesses to make that portion of Idaho Drive underground. This line item is just for cable and equipment and rubber goods to put in that conduit to finish up that project. So.
Yeah, and then, I think this is a very valuable project, and I also, correct me if I'm wrong, too, with this project, we're going down to the city's new Jordan well, so Jordan well number 2 for the water utility, and by placing that line underground rather than overhead, that's a reliability issue for the city and increased reliability by going underground, correct?
Yes, it'll reduce the risk that we have with that current overhead line. Once in a while it gets brush from a tree branch. There's a lot of tree growth around there, especially as you get out toward that Jordan well and down Amsterdam Hill. There's also a lot of squirrels that like to climb around on poles up there too. So we do our best to keep them off of there, but can't train them all. We have a line item for a warehouse crane on there. I had that in 24. I missed my target on my budget projection a little bit, so we're going to ask for $110,000 to be dropped down this year. What that is we constructed the Pella Fiber building with infrastructure in there to put a warehouse crane in there so that we can load and unload trucks when they bring big transformers. The current methodology in doing that is to use a pneumatic rubber tire fork truck, and some of those things are heavy enough that we take that thing right up to its rating. And when you're lifting something off of a flatbed semi that's 5 feet in the air, it doesn't make the most desirable conditions. So if we can pick those things up from a sturdier place, that'd be a great key for our utility. The next big thing is the big one that we've been talking about for, I think I've been here 11 years, and I think I've had that in my budget every year. So it's been in that 10-year projection out there, and it's just been out of reach, and finally it's here. This is largely the purchase of electric meters, and the key to all of these electric meters, why do we need to replace all of them? Along with the rate increases from Missouri River, they also changed our rate structure. And what we are billed by Missouri River is a time of use rate, which means when we're using power from 8 o'clock in the morning to 4 p.m. at night, which is when all of our big manufacturers are doing the most production, we're getting billed at a higher rate than what we are in the afternoon and evenings and overnights. And what we currently can't do with our metering is we can only read what we can do with those meters is we can read them once a month. And that tells us how many kilowatt hours have been burned throughout an entire month. Can't narrow down by the hour. What these meter purchases and replacements are going to do is going to make it so that we can structure our rates so that we can bill our customers more closely to the way that Missouri River is billing us. So the key thing there is to get our rates in alignment. We'll have a rate study after we get some data in those meters, and then we'll be able to educate the public on when to use their dishwashers and when to run their water heaters. And we'll talk about putting a load reduction program in force in our policies, where we'd be able to turn off people's air conditioners for 15 minutes and cycle them on and off in the summertime when we're hitting peak loads, hopefully saving us money. I think we ran the calcs on that a couple of years ago, and we're looking at possibly saving $50,000 a month on if we could get one of those implemented widely throughout the city. We'll have to decide in future meetings if that's going to be mandated or if that's going to be incentivized for people to sign up for a program like that. But just coming down the pike, we'll talk about that.
And then Nate, from the AMI system too, the reliability aspect of AMI too.
Right. Plenty of other aspects that go along with AMI, your outage management. Your meters are going to tell you that they're losing power before people see their lights go off. We'll get a message on our information systems. It'll also intertwine with a mass notification system where if people are at work, they'll know their power went off. Why did I have to reset my clocks when I got home? Well, I got a notification that we had a power outage. We'll be able to interact with that and interact with our customers as to when power is going to be restored and what the problem might be and things like that. Many other advantages. I already mentioned kind of the the load management, load shedding. We can also do volt bar management, where we look at the meter on the very end of our line and we keep that customer to the very minimum voltage that we can by ANSI standards. And that'll also help save us, it'll also take a little bit fewer amperages to run those and help cut our costs a little bit. Rather than the way we do it now, we do it at the substation end and we just guess that we're hopefully keeping them to voltage. We do that pretty conservatively. We pump out a higher voltage out of the substation and we know that we're keeping our customers at the end of the line happy.
On the shutting off the air conditioner, do you have to put a switch in?
Yeah, so National Electric Code mandates that all of your air conditioners have an external disconnect on the outside of your house, just so that electricians or emergency responders can have access to shut them
Yeah,
off.
okay.
We just put a device in line with that communicates with these meters that allows that to open and close.
Yeah, I forgot that was there. So, okay, thank you.
Nate, I don't see a line item in there about buying city territory from the co-op. When's that one gonna go on there? I live on the other side of the street, so I don't get all the benefits of all this. And there are other city jurisdictions that don't either.
We are lucky to have a partner in Mid-American Energy who is currently building a new transmission line to Pella from Des Moines. They're getting rid of that 100-plus-year-old steel structure, galvanized steel structure line that seems to melt itself in two from time to time.
100+ years.
Yeah. 1919, I think, is when that was built. It might have been reconductored in the 50s or something like that, but I think it's pretty old. But anyway, REC's reliability will be going up. We can't do anything about their rates, but we have talked to our legislators about options there. They seem to think that Pella is one of the few cities with municipal electric utilities that are growing and facing this kind of problem. So it's not getting much traction from our legislators. Next thing is vehicle replacement. I think we have the 2013 pickup that's starting to get a little bit of rust on it. That's just crew trucks, the trucks that we do service around in. Luke has an ambitious plan to get the traffic signals at Walmart intersection working reliably again, and I say Luke because I'm gonna put it all on him.
Can I forward you the emails then, Luke? 'Cause I do get a few about that.
Yeah. That's something that we've struggled with since that thing was put in. It was video cameras in the beginning and they blow around in the wind and create and trigger signals when there's nothing there, and then the wind plugs those things up, and then we switched over to a battery powered hockey puck that we put into the asphalt, and that was guaranteed to last 10 years, but there was no written guarantee, just like, oh, this will last you 10 years, then you gotta replace them, and that hasn't worked out so well. So we're gonna go back to the old fashioned sawing into the asphalt, wires, and rewire our cabinet and make that thing work just like the one we put out at 163 National Street on the road. So, Luke put a skid steer on there. We did a lot of work on our Vermeer Road duct bank, and we found that to be a very handy tool. I think it's got a couple of accessories on there that he wants to talk about too.
So, like Nate mentioned, skid steer, spent somewhere close to $15,000 on skid loader rental in the last season. And anticipation is that number being the same or higher this year with the amount of work we'd like to do with that skid loader. In addition to our transmission line along 163 and removal of brush, I've reached out to contractors, and that price to contract that out would be somewhere in the $10,000 range. So with all the expense coming up, it made sense to put that in our budget and add that piece of equipment. Something we can also use for outages, instead of having to rely on Pella rental and using one of theirs in the event that we needed it. And also getting into backyards and bringing in larger transformers into backyard residential areas and not bringing trucks or equipment, so less damage. So.
And we see a lot of brush on our transmission right away along 163 from about Fifield Road, the old railroad bridge, down toward Brook Circle. There's a lot of tall vegetation around that area. We need kind of a brush hog, I think is what it's called, to put on the front of that thing and go out there and clear that out sometimes. That'd save us a lot of time. Couple of items out there in 26, we can brush over those unless anybody wants to address those directly. An arc flash study, the National Electric Code mandates that arc flash studies be done on your electric panels in your homes and businesses nowadays. We also need to do one on our distribution center system every 10 years. So all the 12,500 volt systems, we need to make sure that those are classified, and that tells our crews what class of clothing that they need to be wearing that's explosion and fireproof enough, so they have a certain level of calories and a certain level of certain class of clothing that they have for personal protective equipment, and that's what this arc flash study will help us decide. And last but not least, we have a digger derrick truck. We moved this from a later year because we found one come up from Alltech that meets our specification and is available now. And with your head nods this evening, we'd love to go ahead and make that purchase for our utility. This replaces an old 2003 chassis. We'd love to do like the ambulance does and just take the body off of that and put it on a new chassis, but both of them are well worn, and Luke is going to speak a little bit about what the digger derrick does for those curious.
So the digger derrick is a truck we use almost daily. We use it for pulling wire, setting poles, pulling poles, lifting heavy equipment. It's essentially a small crane with a auger attached to it. It is essential to our jobs and our operation. Like Nate had mentioned, our current chassis is a 2003, and we seem to struggle with reliability issues as well as our remote operation system for it. So we currently only have 2 guys on call at all times, and in the middle of the night, if there's an event and we have to pull out wire and remove wire and reinstall, we can do that with 2 guys. If we keep having issues with the remote and not having a solution to fix it, then we're having to call out additional crew members to do the same job that 2 guys can do if we had a digger derrick with an operating remote. So it's a very important piece of equipment for us.
And you might ask, why are we getting overhead line equipment when we're 95% underground and going more? We still have, what do we count, 1,500 street lights around town?
Yep.
And those get run over from time to time. So that concludes our presentation. We went a little long, and I do apologize for that.
It's not a problem. I would just say it's obviously a pretty healthy reinvestment into the electrical department, but fortunately, we have the fund balance to do it. And if you look out 5 years, it appears to take care of a lot of large items, reinvestment items for the next 5 years. So the electric department is a wonderful asset for the city of Pella. And so to reinvest in it for long term make all the sense in the world. So appreciate you guys' planning and the way you operate the utility. Anyone else, anything for these guys? All right, we'll move on. Thanks, Nate.
Okay. All right. Well, Mr. Doy is taking a seat this evening for the telecommunications utility. We won't be going into detail on rates on this. This is a competitive utility. We will be scheduling a closed session in the month of April to talk about utility rates for the telecom utilities. So some of the items are going to be slimmed down from what you're going to see tonight, but keep in mind that'll be coming at a later date for council on that as well. As far as expenditures and revenues that we have, the positive news is we're up over 2,700 customers currently for the utility on it, and so adding on it. Yeah. Last year, when we made the revenue estimations, we thought, and don't get too hung up on this because this is still relatively new for the city of Pella. We had some ambitious requests as far as hooking customers up. We haven't reached those goals quite yet, but it's still a very healthy revenue growth that we have, and we're up over 2,700 customers, and demand is still very strong for Pella Fiber as well. As far as the expenses on this, Most of that is just attributed to television programming costs, the decreases on what we forecasted. We forecasted more installations on cable than we have, and that's kind of a good news, bad news item for the city of Pella. For programming expenses, by missing the mark on that, we've also had seen a decrease in programming cost as well for Pella Fiber. So let's go ahead with the CIP, and I'll turn the floor over to Mr. Doy.
Okay, for 2025, we've got some customer premise equipment in there, and that's all the stuff that goes to the customer's house. The optical network terminal, the residential gateways, the plume Wi-Fi devices, the various other devices we put in there. We got a stock of that out there to place, and we want to have, you know, efficient equipment on hand to get that taken care of. Our battery, CO battery backup devices, which are at the central office on Jefferson Street, they've got a lifetime of 3 to 5 years, and they're looking at year 3.5, 4 now. 7200 would replace some of the batteries. The last time we tested them, and we test them monthly, they look good. But the batteries, they can all pass this month, and they all fail next month. You know, we just kind of keep an eye on that. So we put some money out there to get those batteries. Not even all of them, some of them replaced, which would do us fine. Technician laptops, they all started with laptops when we first rolled this project out. Those laptops are getting to be 3 and 4 years old. They take a lot of beating in the field. And we've got some good laptops out there that we bought from a company. We didn't get the Panasonic Toughbook because that was a extra $10,000. But we did get another brand that is a tough unit that's out there that should suffice to get that going. Core router replacements, those are the core switches that do 99% of the thinking. That's what ties us to the world and also ties us to our various transport routes. There's 2 of those switches, and obviously one backs up the other. They get a certain age, you're gonna look at replacing those and getting those changed out. And 5 years is that mark, and that's where we're gonna land in 26 and 27. So we figured we'd swap out one year, swap out the other for the next year, hang on to the other ones because you never know, you might need a spare for something. So not gonna be anything wasteful there. And the last, we have a pickup truck for our drop plow. We bought a drop plow when we started this, and we had some technicians working it. We're gonna roll that back out this summer. The truck that we're currently pulling it with is pretty old, one of Nate's or Jamie's hand-me-downs. Not complaining. I put a couple of fender flares on there, hide all the rust. It looks pretty good. So we'll get by a few years. So we'll make it to 2029. And that's about it for our spiel of what we got going on. Any questions?
Still seeing demand for hookups?
Yes. Yeah. We're still scheduling those in. We're back after our 100 TV customers, and Gina's getting those scheduled in for us and getting those done. And then, yeah, it's crazy how we keep records of all of them. So 3 years ago, we hit a house, and they're like, no, we don't want our service, you know, and then now somebody else has bought the house. And of course, the other customer denied getting the drop, so now we're having to put a drop in and get them hooked up. But, you know, it's gonna trickle down eventually, but we're doing pretty good, I think. So people seem to be pretty happy with the service, so.
Think you'll break 3,000?
Yes, we will, yeah. Maybe late next year, but I think we'll get there. Yeah. Well, they built these other 88 homes because the other guys aren't even going in the new neighborhoods. I don't know if you guys are aware of that. The other providers that were here, they don't even show up for the meetings and stuff, so we'll get all those new homes that are being built. They'll all be Pella Fiber customers, hopefully, or they'll do without, I guess. I think we should do pretty good with that.
All right, thanks, Doy.
Thank you.
All right, planning and zoning, I'd like to ask Jerry to come up to the table, please. Jerry's taking his seat. What we have here is very consistent with the city department's budgets. Smaller department in the office, but I will say a very busy department as well. Most people don't realize when we talk about the residential growth and the development growth that we've had, it's Jerry's department that issues all of the permits, development permits for the city of Pella as well. His department's also in charge of code enforcement. And Jerry, your department manages 5 boards.
That is correct.
Yeah, as well. So when we talked this evening about 215 Main Street and redoing those offices and housing the planning and zoning department, please keep in mind, it's not only just the staff members that are going down to the new facility, it's also the associated city boards that are going to be conducting their meetings down there. What that means is that this room should be available more for the police department's usage as well. So let's go ahead, please, Mandy. And Jerry, I think the last thing, and maybe would be nice, is just to have an update on the city's comprehensive plan update. The zoning code was a part of, the zoning code update was a part of the plan as well, and that's the one CIP item that we have, so.
That is correct. Thank you, Mike. Last year, as you remember, we approved funding for our comprehensive general plan. We have gone out to RFP. We have 3 firms that are coming in the beginning of April to be interviewed by the executive committee to rank those firms. Hopefully, by the end of April, we'll have them ranked, and maybe beginning of May, possibly a contract to council to retain a firm to write the new comprehensive general plan. Along with that comprehensive general plan, again, we have the zoning and code update. This process will probably take from 18 to 24 months once we retain a consultant on board. So it's going to span multiple fiscal years and be quite a busy time for the city. In addition to the zoning code, we'll also have them redo portions of the subdivision ordinance, which covers the division of land in the city. So that's where we stand. And so hopefully, again, like I said, May, we should have the ability to have this moving forward and start this process. Sorry, I don't have any more.
I just hope you stay busy with new development.
That we are, very much so.
Yep.
Remind
I'm sorry.
us of the boards you have to look over. Just for-
Remember myself, Planning and Zoning, Board of Adjustment, Historic Preservation, Community Development, Building Board of Appeals, and there's probably one more in there that doesn't meet often, but those are all the boards.
Airport Zoning Board of Adjustment.
That one, yeah.
Yeah,
I knew
that
there
one's
was
fresh
one
in my
there.
mind. So.
That have meetings most every month and cover a multitude of citizen and developer inquiries and questions and variances and appeals and approvals and rezonings and subdivisions. So it is constantly going. Again, as council know, everything that we do will flow to you for your ultimate approval or denial. So it's quite a busy process for us.
It's a good sign. Planning and zoning is busy, that's a good sign.
That's a good sign, it is.
What we also have as a part of this budget is we'll be proposing work sessions this spring to take a look at development fees. Similar to community services, we asked the planning and zoning department to go review our fees comparable to other communities around the metro and local areas as well. What we have here is our proposed fees and what we currently charge on for a development basis as well. And once again, we're going to be scheduling a separate work session this spring to talk about development fees on it, but it's been a number of years since the city adjusted development fees on it. We feel this is very much in line with the market, with more details to come on that as well. So
That is correct, and one thing I would like to point out is the fees last time were 2010, so obviously that was quite a while ago. While what you see up here is what we currently collect and what we're proposing, it's not a comprehensive analysis. And the reason being it's not a comprehensive analysis at this time is because the zoning code and subdivision ordinance may add new procedures which may require hearings or other things that haven't been discussed or created yet. So those fees will be henceforth coming once we finish up with that fee study.
Okay, anything else, anyone? All right, thanks, Jerry.
okay. Let's go ahead and talk about City Hall this evening. And Mandy, after I get done with the operating budget, if you could forward to our CIP and join us at the table, please, as well. As far as the operations here, what we have is with the budget, we had to adjust our IT consultant expenditures. And Brian, correct me if I'm wrong, but we're somewhere right around $220,000 a year in IT expenses. Budget last year was based on about 175 to 180. IT is an item that this last year we had identified it, and we had the reason for the increase this last year was we had some enhanced cybersecurity measures that are continuing to evolve at the city, so we had to do a lot of additional work from a consultant standpoint. Seems like the consultant fees just continue to hang around that $220,000 mark for the city on it, because we deal with cybersecurity and electric utilities and telecommunications utilities. It's never a lack of work for the IT professionals as well. So, but that's the lion's share, is just simply adjusting the budget to what was actual, and that's the biggest reason for our increase. If you back that out, City Hall is very much in line with every other department for this budget as well. So let's go ahead to the CIP, and Mandy, if you can join us. I'll briefly go over this, and then I'm going to turn the floor over here to our two newest departments as well for comments on this. But before we get to them, I'm going to pick off a couple of these projects that we have here that are really associated with other departments. The first one is the demolition of the Second Christian Reformed Church. Denny talked about this last night, but we do have this in the budget for the demolition. There has been some concerns voiced from the public works staff on the condition of the building. And what's planned is the demolition to occur this next fiscal year. Danny, if you could add any context on that or additional background for council's consideration.
Yeah, we'll hopefully get it going soon. We'll need a little bit of assistance because there's some asbestos involved, so we'll definitely have to have an engineer and architect do the short form of some type of contract and construction.
So are we thinking knocking it down or imploding it?
Well, as tall as it is, kind of a little bit both. Make the walls fall in, but yeah, it's up there. But there's holes developing in the roof. There's pieces of the roof falling off. That south side, I want to discourage cars from going on there. We have to cover it off soon. So the bats have taken up full-time residents.
Yeah, where all the bats gonna go?
I don't know.
If we get
Maybe
it,
next
greenhouse.
maybe go to the sycamore tree, get rid of those turkey burgers.
All right, the other project that we have here, and this is really a P&Z project, Jerry's actually over it as well, but we do have in the budget for renovation of the former daycare facilities. And once again, this was a very generous gift to the city of Pella by the Community Betterment Organization on this. We have in the budget a renovation cost of $1.3 million, which includes engineering. When the project's finished, we're planning on moving the planning and zoning department to the new facility. They will be housing, there will be meeting rooms in there for the 5 respective boards as well. We're also going to be transitioning a driver's license station that's currently housed in the community center down to this building as well. We'll have a permanent home in this building. I would also like to say what's included in this renovation is a kind of a bare bones renovation to the 3rd floor upper level of it. But we fully anticipate once the community center renovation takes place, that is a potential option for the community services staff to be housed on the 3rd floor in the facility where the community center is being renovated as well. So again, very generous gift. It is in the proposed budget for $1.3 million. Now with that, nice little segue, we'll turn the floor over first to Brian. And Brian, from City Finance Director perspective, feel free to share any comments that you may have with the City Council, but I'd also like you to talk about this utility billing conversion, which is necessary for our AMI project as well.
Yeah, correct. So from my standpoint, there's a couple projects in here. One is the utility billing conversion, like Mike said. When we started Pella Fiber, we created got a new billing software, NISC, that is able to for the billing and scheduling of work orders and stuff for the Pella Fiber, partly because our current financial software, from my understanding, could not handle all the aspects of what we expected for fiber. And then as we switch over to the AMI metering, our current software is not able to do the time and usage billing component of that. So my predecessor and the utility staff looked at it and found that one. So as we convert all the utilities over to basically AMI, because I think it was kind of not, or we'll talk later, as water and sewer will eventually get over there as well. We need to upgrade and expand the version or the operations under the current utility billing that we use for fiber. So in the end, well, no, because we've talked about it. You'll still get 2 utility bills, one for or fiber and one for all the utilities, but the bills will look similar because they'll be produced by the same software. One of the other ones up there is the accounts payable workflow. This was actually in the plan, I think 2 years ago, but due to staffing change and that was and shortage, we just never got it implemented, so we brought it back. What it is it's efficiency with our workflow with accounts payable. Right now, all the physical invoices get sent out to departments for their coding and return. This will kind of move that to an electronic basis, so they'll be sent electronically for coding and then back in, and then also allow for the digital retainage and storage, so people can look them up and find them a lot quicker and stuff. So it's kind of bringing that project back. And the last 2 up there are IT related. We have a standard amount we purchase computers to replace throughout the city, all departments for staff usage, so we have those on rotation. That's just that. And then the network infrastructure, our IT people have kind of gone through. You'll see a big increase for next year. There's a lot of switches and stuff that, and firewalls that are kind of meeting their end of life, so we'll have quite a few of those to replace, and those aren't cheap. And then some of those are the same throughout, so that's kind of what that network infrastructure component is. So, any questions? It's not fun and exciting like every other department.
But I will say this, and this is for all the accountants in the audience. We've really asked a lot of our accounting staff if you could imagine operating 2 accounting and billing systems. And we've done that now for the past, since Pella Fiber has been automated. And so it's been a challenge up at City Hall, but we're slowly assimilating, and the plan is to be eventually on one, but these things take time. So again, the utility billing conversions needed for the AMI to accommodate time and use metering as well. And I'd also like to turn the floor over to Miss Mandy Smith, our city clerk and HR director. And Mandy's been doing a bang-up job already since taking over HR on things. We've seen a lot of automation, a lot of efficiency as well. And also Mandy's made several initiatives at the city. One of the ones would be as far as our safety committee, which I've really been appreciative on it. So Mandy's very, very busy. And so Mandy, feel free to share any thoughts that you may have with council.
Sure, yeah. From a financial perspective, I don't have much on there for CIP at all. Mine is more operational. As Mike mentioned, we did hit the safety a little bit harder this year. We've had our work comp rates kind of raising over the last several years, and that does cost a lot in premiums. So focusing on looking at a new lineup of a safety committee, having department heads involved with that, and then we did increase the operational budget for that, mainly to have OSHA walkthroughs done. So we will have an instructor that will go through all of our sites and just give us feedback on what improvements we can make from a safety perspective. So those are coming up here soon. The other thing that I've been hitting a little hard, which you guys noticed at the last meeting, was benefit offerings. It's been a long time since we've looked at those, so dental and vision were 2 that we implemented, and currently looking at medical. It's been a really long time since we've made medical changes, so the renewal rates came in very favorable, so we're kind of looking at if we can make any changes to enhance those benefits for our employees. Otherwise, yeah, my focus is more, you'll hear a lot more from me as later in the summer comes. I'm doing a review of all of our personnel policy manual. We have not done that for quite a long time, so more to look forward to at future council meetings.
Thank you, Mandy.
And any explanation for why health insurance was favorable?
Yeah,
I mean, that's usually, oh, lucky you, it's only going up 10%.
yeah, it's been the way that we have it structured. We have a very high deductible plan with Walmart, keeps that premium low, and then a partially self-funded.
Oh, that's right.
So while I like to say to employees, the paperwork side of it is difficult because you have multiple providers and a lot of EOBs that you're getting. it's worth it in the end because our premiums have stayed really low and renewal rates too. So I always say if you get overwhelmed with the paperwork, just bring it in to me, I'll help you through it. It's worth it in the end when your premiums are really low, so, yeah.
All right, thank you.
Thanks.
Well, that's a nice transition. Let's go ahead and move into the Public Works Department this evening. The first department division that we have up is the water utility. And what we have this evening is for council's attention. As you may recall, last year at this time, we had proposed a 7% increase in water rates. We're actually going to be taking up that ordinance this spring and considering the 7% rate increase. As we go through the water utility, I'd like to mention that that's still under evaluation. Denny's going to be talking, and Brent this year, about issues that we had with our well system as well as our RO systems as well this last summer. So we're still in the process of not figuring out, but evaluating financial options for cost recovery on the expenditures that we had this last year. But the rates that you see right here include the 7% increase that we have for the water rates. And what I always tell folks is when you talk about the water utility, one thing to keep in mind is the quality of water that comes out of your tap. You can have the lowest rates in the world, but truthfully, if you're a utility that does bare minimum treatment, oftentimes what happens is your customers have filters inside their house, and that's additional expenses that never show up in city water rates as well. I feel when you look at our water rates, they're very competitive on that as well, but keep in mind that we're also going to have to continue to evaluate them, not only this spring with the proposed rate increase that was to take place this year, but also in the future. We just got done listening to the electric utility answer the question, why are utility rates or utility growth stagnant? Well, we had energy efficiency. That's been something that the water utility has struggled with for the past, I'd say, a good 10 years on it as well. And one of the items that we have, at least on, from the efficiency standpoint, it's here to stay. The issue that we struggle with is when you look at water utilities and electric utilities, a lot of our cost is fixed, it's infrastructure related, it's here regardless how much water is actually used in the system. So cost recovery is always a key thing. And we're going to be talking further about water rates this spring on it, but once again, the takeaway is that I feel we're very comparable, not only with the local area, but anywhere in the state of Iowa as well. So let's go ahead, please, Mandy. Talk about the financial projections that we have here. And as you can see, we've been hovering right around that $1 million mark that we've had. We've gotten some this past spring, and I'll let Denny and Brand allude to the 1 and Jordan 2, as well as the RO system and the treatment issues that we're currently under evaluation. We're in the process of addressing that. And so the fund balance here that we have projected and what we're actually starting out 25, maybe a little bit higher depending on which revenue option, if we issue revenue debt or not this year to recover some of those costs. But on a go-forward basis, what we have factored in, it's very likely in FY26 that we will need to increase water rates. And the key thing that Brian and I are discussing from the water rate utility is whether it's best to have kind of a lump sum rate increase, such as a 10%, or if it's rather that we go to an annual rate increase for both water and wastewater, something in the tune of 2 to 3% and just an automatic. There's a lot of utilities in the state of Iowa that are doing that, and just to battle the energy efficiency, stagnant revenue growth for the water and wastewater. And keep in mind, for both utilities, you have a significant amount of infrastructure. We've never done that in Pella on it. It's always been on an as-needed basis, but at least we're having the discussion at the staff level. But what ultimately the goal is and the plan is to build our fund balance back up to that $1 million level that we have here. And right here, the difference is we are factoring in some rate increases for 27 as well. So let's go ahead to the CIP if we could, or actually before we get there. Very typical of the city budget this year, right around the 3.31% expenditure growth. Again, utility revenues are somewhat stagnant that we have with the budget this year. We did factor in some load growth, and that actually had a rate increase in it as well. And that's probably the biggest difference between the actual on it is we didn't incorporate it yet because we're looking at the emergency repairs that we underwent with our well system. So for next year, we're forecasting revenues of $3.1 million. So let's go ahead, please, Mandy, and go ahead to the CIP. I'd like to turn the floor over to Public Works Director Denny Byard. And Danny, what I'd like to have you focus on is talk about the well system, what we had as far as the repair, and what we also have planned for Jordan, for the Jordan well inspection for next year as well, so.
Yeah, unfortunately, a lot of our studies, we're working with Veenster and Kim too, to kind of study the situation, develop some ideas how to prevent what almost happened. And some of you know, we have Jordan Well 1 that we've had over 30 years there at the plant as our workhorse. When Jordan Well 2, south of town, 8,000 feet was dug, we've had an iron and a manganese problem, which lucky us, the furthest place west in Iowa was Riverside until we hit iron and manganese south of Pella. It's a common on the eastern side of the state, but it was found nowhere west. And what it does is in the system we put in 6-7 years ago, the pre-filters plug up. So we're working with DNR on a new permit to flush it more routine, but we're also working with Veenster and Kim to add some bag filters, and those costs are anywhere from, that must be yours. And the reason we don't have those big numbers up there, it could be bag filters at 50,000, it could be a great big sand filter at 750. So stay tuned on that. The issues we got into last fall where it was really touch and go, and we had a lot of people up nights babysitting this stuff. We were getting prepared to do the routine maintenance on one. We knew there was some issues. We knew there was some rust going on, and it was time. It had been running 6 years, and we'd seen some rust issues going on. Unfortunately, we found some new plant stuff that was grounded to it that we thought was causing a majority of it, which has since been separated. So we went to well number 2 that we hadn't used much because of this iron problem needing resolved. We started flushing it because we knew we were going to need to be dependent on it for a week. And I don't know, we ran it a couple of days and it shorted out. That's a submersible 350 horse motor down 500 feet, shorted out, we're dead in the water. Thankfully, we hadn't that happened then and not before we took one out of service, because we would have had a 7-day gap almost no matter what. So we got a borrowed pump in there, still in there today. Our pump, that submersible for 2, is being rebuilt. We jumped over to 1 then once we were comfortable with the borrowed pump. It's only a 300 horse, so it produces a little bit less water. So we were waiting for the water usage to go down in September, because the Central just come back to school. So okay, now the water usage is down. We jumped on 1. Northway come to town, treat us right. And there was so much corrosion, that casing, they had to cut every 20 feet and not screw it as normal. And, well, I guess we weren't quite ready to switch yet. And that pump, that's motor on top, pump in the bottom, the pump blew up, bearings went out of it. Another thing we knew was going on, the oil line was leaking. There's an oil line goes all the way to the bottom, but even the experts don't think that made that pump. The corrosion, I have pictures. We should have had a PowerPoint tonight. But that pump just let go in the bottom. So thankfully we had the borrowed one, well number 2 going. We were changing pre-filters every so many hours, and that's about $500 per change. But we kept the town in water, and Northway got it out of there, and they rounded up those parts, and now that well's all put back together, all new parts, new pump. And that well, a couple years ago, we did buy a second pump, so we have a standby for that one, or for the second motor up top on that one. So we're anxious. Probably that 200,000 shown in 25 will hopefully happen before July 1st. They're rebuilding our submersible, and then when we're ready to put in, they've got to pull that one out, put our motor back in, and fix any casing or shaft pieces that are, because again, that one's 6 to 7 years old. And while we're doing that, we want to ice pig, it's called, clean the transmission line back to town to get rid of that iron and that manganese. So hopefully then we'll have a new permit in place. We'll be able to flush it, switch back and forth between the wells, have a cleaner product that's not clogging our pre-filters. So that's kind of it, and that's the short story. I mean, and Kurt and Brent, they could tell you a lot worse horror stories. It was really touch and go, and God was looking after us, because if it had gone in the wrong order by a day or two, water action would have been tough. So we think we've got that under control now, but then going forward, along with that being case study, we think we can hopefully reduce some of that rust. Like I say, we know we got some of that grounding off the plant was somehow getting grounded down to that well. But that 200 will probably show up every 3-4 years. We got to go after one well or the other to stay. not stay out so far on the edge. But it's just, that well was new to us, at 8,000 feet away, that iron and manganese had never been seen before. And all of a sudden, we drill a new well, and there it is. So anyway, we'll get back to the rest of the list. Distribution main, to that number at the top, that's the guys laying pipe, that's buying them pipe, hydrants, valves. We got a crew who loves to lay pipe. The next one, replacing meters as many as we can, but we're gonna do a majority of them in the AMI, which is a number down lower. I guess half of that 388 is over in wastewater, because of course that metering bills for both utilities. High service maintenance pumps, that's routine. The RO inspection will be routine from this time forward. That's a pickup truck, and then a couple of those others are half a pickup truck we share with wastewater. That's a distribution collection crew when you see a half a truck. So there's another number to match that over on the other side. Skate upgrades, that's all the equipment, talking back to the computer system, talking to the guys' cell phones and laptops at home. Lincoln Street, grand total, some of those other numbers, some of them are over in streets, some are big numbers over in wastewater. That was one that snuck up, not really snuck up on us. We have a 10-year cleaning and televising where they clean the sewer, go in and televise. But in the last 11 years, we repaired a hot spot there right before tulip time 2 years ago. Spent about 40 grand on that hot spot. It's a relatively deep sewer for Pella. And now we've got 3 more bad spots. So we've made a determination that whole 650 feet, it's gonna need total reconstruction. So we'll do water main and sewer while we're there, but it's relatively deep, 18, 19 feet deep. And that's where we like to brag on our television and cleaning program. That's what it's to do, is to catch these things when they're still lineable. We'll talk about that a little more with wastewater, but that Lincoln Street's gonna be a big project we need to do as soon as possible. There's a 1-ton truck. That's a half a truck again, right?
Half a truck.
Yeah, these pickups and ton trucks, I won't mention which brands, but some of the government discounts of 9,000, 10,000 are over. Once COVID hit, we used to get 9,000 off from Ford. It's gone. We had a ton truck we bid last year. Actually, this is it, back in the budget, because it came in 17,000 more than we thought it would from a truck we bought a year and a half before that. So trucks have just, the numbers have went to the extreme. RO cleaning, that water tower painting, that's a huge number. That's the north tower. That tower originally was lead paint, so that will be tinted. If you've ever drove through town and wondered why they had a tint around their water tower, you'll be seeing that in a couple of years. Because we coated it, 8, 9 years ago, and if you drive, it's looking tough now. It's finally time to take it down to bare metal and start over. So therefore, it'll have to be tinted. Lime lagoon removal, that's the old lime lagoons. DNR is gonna mandate we remove those. We keep thinking they'll kind of have a changeover and change their mind where we can just bury that. They're not gonna let us get by with that. They're still insisting that we haul it away. And it has very little ag use anymore, what's left, so that's gonna be a number that's hard to swallow when we get there. Backhoe replacement, that's half of, a third of a backhoe we'll be sharing. A few years back, when we bought a new backhoe, we kept the old rubber-tired backhoe, so we'll still be keeping now what was the new one as the old one to do compaction while the other one's digging. And of course, council's been good to us. We have the other larger track hoe that's good for us down to the 10-foot range and depth. After that, we usually sub out and hire somebody that has a little bigger equipment. Then the membrane replacement, we hope we push it out that far. And then the valves and metering at the plant. What are we missing?
So where will you go with the line?
We'll try to,
Where are you gonna hide it?
It'll end up on farm fields, usually where they haul it. But, yeah, it all has to be dug out, and then they have to haul in dirt, bury everything. They won't let you just bury the line, I guess. But you can spread it on fields everywhere.
Can't bury it in the dirt, but you can spread it on the dirt.
and just get in the dirt
Yep.
after you're done.
Makes sense.
Yeah. We're hoping we get that number down where we can cut into it and de-watered enough where it can be hauled dry. Because as you know, in the past, we've had to haul it wet, and that gets extremely expensive. don't always trust the calculations, how it's been, you know, you gotta stay right on the people that are in that industry, it just, so those are some options we'll look at. If we can hold it dry, we should be able to get done a whole lot less. But unfortunately, when they build it, if it was in 2 cells, that's why most people build more than 1 cell. So you can take one out, get all the water out of it for a couple of years, and then you can dry haul it while you're using the other one, and then you switch. But of course, now I don't see us ever using those again, now that we switched to Jordan, so.
You kept talking about televising the sewer, so maybe Monty can put that on fiber. It'd be entertaining. See what you find down there.
About 10 minutes are interesting. Yeah, it's, you're riding through, you know what,
Yeah.
literally, and you get a feel for it. Sometimes you can sit there and look at a 400-foot stretch and not see much, and then somebody with a better eye knows more what they're looking for. We'll talk a little bit more about that when we, another big one that's out there, that's a mandate, you hear us talking about it in our monthly updates, when we get them in on time, right, Randy? The DNR, and actually it starts with the EPA, you know, is we have to report, we're out investigating. We've actually hired a consultant to go through our files, and what they're doing, they analyze, they know what years everybody pretty much used lead service and not. But on all those houses that meet that age, from the early 1900s up to 1965, 70, we're vac and hole down and seeing if we can make a determination. Because you may recall, it was common when the subdivision was put in, from the main to the curb stop was lead, and from the curb stop in the house was galvanized. A lot of that galvanized has been replaced because it was junk, it all fell apart. So even if we go in the house and see copper and the people say, well, we think we have it, they only replace to the curb stop because the lead's good pipe. It's just lead pipe. And so we're being mandated, you know, if the presidency goes the other way, maybe EPA will be a little softer and give us a longer length of time. The thought now, it's not set, but they're thinking once we have an idea how many, they're gonna want us to do 10% a year. And we've had brief discussions of, you know, some communities are sharing that cost, because to a homeowner, and we're short underground contractors, to a homeowner, that's anywhere from 2,000 to 12. It could be a big hit. If that water main and runs clear, or their service runs clear across the street to the water main over there, and there's a bunch of concrete involved, driveway, sidewalk, street, signs to close the street, it gets expensive fast. So we'll have a lot of discussions in the next couple of years. Our initial report's due this fall.
October 16 of this year, we have to have a report in with an idea of how many lead services we have. We won't have them all completed by then. So you'll list them as unknowns, and they will count them as lead. But as of that date, the EPA should have their plan, and their plan is, so far, is 10% replacement per year of lead services.
How many have you found so far?
I didn't count that number, but I sent them to them, they put them in. We actually have to list what's from the street to the stop box to the house. So I've got my meter guy, when he's in houses, at least getting what that is. And we're finding anything from, we're thinking 1945 forward, there's no lead, is kind of what we're seeing now. Previous is, we're seeing lead, so.
How many houses are in that range? How many houses could be?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
I should remember that number too. Our consultant has that for us now. Last I checked with the guys, I think we've done, this has got some age on it, like 130, and there was like 40 of them that we thought were lead. We're around about 35% there for a while. But then we hit a bad stretch too since then we hit it, you know, it's.
They did a lot north of Washington, so they're gonna start getting into serious lead. And, you know, I don't even know how we're gonna determine what's uptown. It's all lead, I'm sure, but. Yeah.
Maybe this is a dumb question, but is that lineable? Is that too small diameter?
Too small. Plus, you know, it's just like our arteries, over time, they're slowly clogging too. So they started out, you know, a 1 inch or 3/4, and they're a whole lot less than that now.
wanted to make an observation, because you two just are so casual about that whole Jordan well. And I think it's important that people understand that when you say you changed that filter, what was it, every 4 hours, or was it every 2 hours? It was round the clock. And someone at this table was on vacation and jumped in their pickup truck and went and got the piece that was needed for that well, and none of us knew that there was a problem.
We had a fellow city, or a sister city, I'll call it, North Liberty, had the same system. And these pre-filters in the canister that we have to change out, for a while, we did them every 2 hours. At one point, 2 to 3 hours. There's 27 of these long tubes in there that collect, because you absolutely are not supposed to get that grub and grind and minerals into the ROs themselves, because it'll totally foul up everything in your dead water. So every couple, the guys would have to unbolt this, I don't know, 15, 20 bolts around that thing, every couple hours, and take that canister apart. Well, they got the other R, you know, there's 3 trains, so the other ones are set up the same way. But yeah, we've taken them Dutch letters, we probably ought to do that a couple more times. We picked up, I don't know, 2, 3 pallets that they loaned us. We paid them back eventually, but still.
We are grateful to you. Thank you. None of us were the wiser.
And an empty trailer coming back home that way.
Okay, thank you.
But yeah, that was before this last run-in. That was a year and a half ago. So. Anything else? Water. Through all this, it's in quality water, safe to drink. We do still get some calls. A lot of it's attributed to people have their water heaters turned up too high. And you will get a little grit in your bathtub once in a while. Like, we encourage you to get it turned down below 130 or so. 150, you're gonna boil minerals out of the water. We get that complaint a little bit.
So if that water heater is too high, is there also a calcification that could happen on your faucets or
Yeah,
that type of thing?
When we first started running this plant, we were at a higher pH with what the engineers kind of told us to start with. We were seeing calcium flakes in the system. We started reducing our pHs, changing processes. A lot of that, a lot of it was hot water recirculators. You keep recirculating the hot water, keep heating it up. That's where we were seeing a lot of calcium flakes coming out. We've got it about as low as we can. You still will see some calcium flakes, especially when you're reheating the water. But
Okay.
it's not near as bad in the water heaters, but it's best to keep them lower.
And
Not superheating the water.
And part of the reason for keeping that pH tweaked at that level is to actually coat the inside of the lead pipes we still have. So we don't dare go lower, otherwise we'll scour a lead pipe, and then you have the problem of the lead getting the house to the baby. That's the actual problem. So you can only take the pH so low.
Okay.
And then you have a little bit of this calcium, but it's a balancing act that the guys do a great job, and now I'm in way over my head and shouldn't even say anything on the chemistry.
But yeah, originally with the lead services, I think Pella had a terrible problem with lead and that was the most economical way was to coat the pipes. So we continue to do that. We try to lay a thin coat of basically calcium on the pipes so the lead can't leach into the water. So, because we do test for lead regularly, so we got to keep that out of the system.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
So water. We'll move on to the dirty stuff.
Very similar to the water utility as far as the rates. I think you'll find our rates are very competitive overall in the wastewater utility. Once again, when we talk about energy efficiency appliances, keep in mind the wastewater utility shares the same water meter with the water utility as well. So kind of a ditto story as far as revenue growth on the wastewater side of things. But overall, I think you'll find, again, especially in our local area, our rates are super competitive and not only here, but statewide as well. Let's go ahead, please, Mandy. And again, from the fund balance standpoint, with wastewater, we've had better rates, at least a little bolder strategy on rate increases. I'm thinking on the last 2 DNR mandates that we've done in the last 10 years, there's been roughly between 33 and 40% rate increases each time with the mandates. And so been a little bit more aggressive on the wastewater side, and that's helped maintain the fund balance compared to the water side, where we haven't necessarily attacked the rates as hard as what we did on the wastewater side on things. But again, you can see down here, we're up to 1.5 million, and we also have a slight drawdown in fund balance down to 1.3 in FY27. Let's go ahead with the operational standpoint. Once again, we have a very similar budget to what you've seen throughout the city, a little bit over 1.46% increase to the overall expenditures for the utility. And Mandy, let's finish up with the CIP. And with that, I'd like to go ahead and turn the floor over to Public Works Director Danny Byard. And Danny, we talked about the Lincoln Street CIP. Maybe if we could shed a light on some of these lining projects that we have that you guys have planned in off years on it and candidates for those, and some of the other items that we haven't already previously discussed with the water utility.
Yeah, Lincoln Street, we did talk a little bit about that in the water section here. That, like I say, the tapes from 11 years ago showed three more hot spots, and by the time we spend 50 to 75,000 on each of those hot spots, you're real near the Y going to the next house just down the street, you know, maybe 510, and you could damage it while you're down there or damage the main line. It's just, so we felt it. We had garden, a couple guys ride through the sewer, look at the tapes to conclude the same thing we did. It just, we got to totally reconstruct that stretch. So we'll do water, sewer, everything. It's about 18, 19 feet deep. I think there's 8 houses involved. Some of them have easy ways out, but there'll be a couple in the middle walking for, yeah, just a few weeks. So that's a scary, but that's why we do televising and cleaning, to try to prevent catastrophes when unexpected. Because something like that could fail in the middle of the night, and, you know, we could be 48 hours out there getting down to it to get everything opened up. And when they're that deep, that would be a hired crew. We've got a couple in the area that are capable of that. But if we can line it and prevent it and gain another 20, 30, 40 years, we love to line them. And that moves me up to those lining projects every other year. We have a list. We just retyped it. It's 2 pages that go on of candidates, good candidates where there's double crack or more. And unfortunately, in a dry, you know, we've been in a 5-year dry spell now, and you look at a lot of real estate turnover. People think they have a dry basement. One of these summers, we're gonna have some 4 or 5 inch rains again. Mark's been around this a long time. And then all of our phones ring constantly. And unfortunately, what happens, these pipes that aren't lined and they have a lot of extra cracks, it'll blow pieces up because they're under pressure. The manholes are surcharged, and then that piece doesn't go back in place. You get a sinkhole, the street fails, and then we repeat it again. And that's been going on in the Midwest for the last 100 years. But so anyway, we like to keep on that. That's what that 145, 180 are all about. You know, from there up, there's some pickups again, some half trucks, manhole rehab. That's actually lining some manholes that are failing, or brick manholes, or they got a lot of I&I. We try to stay on top of that. We have a contractor that comes in every other year. Actually does a few of Doug's storm sewers while he's there, so Doug has some numbers too for that in our maintenance. Skate upgrade, there again, Dave's equipment, talking to the computer system. UV lamps, those are in our new system, so that's gotten a little better. But the tail end of the plant where the UV is killing all the bacteria, that's what those are. Digester cleaning, we need to do that here in the next year or so, where the digesters are taken offline and then all the sludge is taken out of those. There's the other half of the AMI. Then it comes to the jet vac. That's an important piece. You see that, unfortunately, that truck's out on the street most days. We do 30-day cleaning. So in areas where we have sewers that we just know they're flat, they got bellies in them, they don't run well. But that truck's near the end of its life. It's what, 15, 16 years old or so?
It's a 2007.
Yeah, and unfortunately, it's a unique piece of equipment. Vermeer's been messing with, they've got some trucks out there. They don't have reels on any of theirs yet. They just have back trucks. This, of course, has the reel and the cutters and the jets on the end. So maybe there'll be a time when they actually have a truck that can meet that need too. Lift station upgrades, that stuff's all approaching, well, no, it's not approaching, it's over 40 years old.
Over
We're aging ourselves. And so it's just a little bit of everything on those pump stations, 1, 2, and 3. You know, from piping that's 40 years old, a lot of corrosion in the joints. Some of the pumps are that age, motors. So that's a thorough going through. Skid loader, that's a third, again, shared with other departments. We may have to, you know, we're kind of like the electric department. We not only use the one we've got, I think we hand me down the last one to Chandler's group, but we'll probably keep this old one as a backup because we've been renting a second one. When the guys are laying pipe and the streets crews want to lay storm sewer secondary, and those are important piece of equipment for us.
This is actually an additional.
In addition to.
Yeah, this is half water, half wastewater for the distribution and collection crew.
Right, so this is other than, we're not even thinking of getting rid of the street one.
Right.
Even though we've shared it too. And then we have so many offline or off-street sewers, that is a UTV, just a one-seater, but we commonly rent them during our televising and cleaning project. We have miles and miles of off-street sewers. Some of them have gotten hard to get to. You know, so we're constantly back in there 2-3 miles, renting one every summer pretty much. Streets also rents one. We were on doing 2 at a time, so we're thinking it's probably time we need to just look at buying one and having one in-house. Things you can't see, actually big items that aren't on this list yet, are out there in the 2030, 33. Of course, there's the DNR mandate on nutrient reduction. They're hitting all communities. We're due a report August of this year. We currently have Fox Strand working on that for us. And we're looking at when some of our debt falls off but in that report this fall, we'll have to make promises to DNR what year we're gonna attack it. And we had some rough estimates at 10,000 feet in a couple of years ago. That was like $7 million, excuse me. And some of the recent, as you may remember, that last $4 million we spent was headed in this direction. All of that stuff's compatible. Some of it was headed in this direction we needed for other things currently. But that'll be a big number out there, whether it's somewhere in 31, 32. But in August, we got a decision to make to when we get a promise that we're gonna do that. What else are we forgetting, Dave?
Can you talk about the state revolving fund that you show as a source of revenue there?
Yeah, it's a great source, low interest. I guess we haven't done anything recently. Usually, what is it about?
Brian, the interest rate on the SRFs?
I think they may just put it back to, historically, it's been 3.5, and then last few years, when interest rates were low, they had lowered it to 1 3/4, but I think they just recently raised it back up to about 3. So.
And then typically it's almost always on a 20-year, isn't it, payback? You know, we don't have to start making payments till it's in the ground, working, accepted, finalized, and then that lower interest rate starts. So yeah, it's a great tool. Yeah, that nutrient reduction, of course, those kind of, and possibly even those pump stations 1, 2, and 3. Those may be SRF loans depending on where the fund balances are at the time. But yeah, our entire plant, you know, I think I bragged about it here a while back. The same year, or the year before ours was built, Indianola's was built, and they're now building an entirely new plant, or in the middle of it, or just finished up.
I think just finished up.
You know, and we roundtable about that today. B&K helped and they actually did both plants, but ours went to Palawanna brick and mortar back in the day, 40-some years ago. And Indianola's, the corrosion just took over and they had to start over. And plus, over the years, you guys have had $3 and $4 million improvements here and added clarifiers, and you added the sludge tanks and a lot of things. And I think our friends east here are probably staring, they need a new plant. They have 2 plants now, they need to combine it, put them in a pump station, they're staring at $100 million. So that's the kind of money you can talk about for these things. So we're proud of our plant yet, even though it's 1980 basically, 81. So 42 years old, and it's still chugging away, but it's gonna need some TLC again. But it's had a lot of long years to keep it going.
Are you still firing that original methane generator?
It's still probably got the original serial number, but I think that's probably the only thing original on that is. But yes, we still run that thing on a daily basis.
We were way ahead of the times.
Yeah,
Right.
it's been overhauled 5, 6 times. And we don't overhaul till what, 15, 20,000, a couple of those times?
I think we've approached 30,000
Yeah.
at the longest.
You know, most farmers with good tractors, they redo that 6 to 10,000 hours. And but it's paid this city well. I mean, burn that methane to heat the digesters. It keeps chugging.
On Lincoln Street, you'll be putting in storm sewers separate?
It'll be everything while we're there. There's a lack of that, and I forget how good a shape we are. Our standard, once we tear our street out, we go back with gravel sub-base too and sub-drains to help the life of the pavement overall. And it helps the whole construction process, because once you get the subgrade accepted, compacted, you get rock on it, it's just a matter of waiting for one sunny day to pave, because once you got that gravel beat in. So that's kind of our standard now, and we have a sub-drain on each side, 2 feet deep, hooked to the storm sewer if we have some anywhere close. But yeah, there'll be a little bit of storm sewer. Now that one happens to be, it's pretty much on top of the hill, one of the few hills in Bella. So that's why it's deep too. They cut through that hill, and that's why it's 18, 19 feet deep. And we don't have many sewers in Bella, thankfully, that are that deep. So that'll have some challenges in itself. Slow digging. So yeah, if anybody, you're always welcome to come down and watch some videos if anybody like.
I'll take your word for it. All right, thanks.
Thanks.
I believe we have Mr. Riggin is next, and while Doug's taking a seat, Mandy, let's go ahead and jump to road use tax. What we have here from the financial projections is we've been carrying a higher than expected fund balance, and some of these projects that we'll be discussing this evening have been previously budgeted occurring on this year, and so we do have a drawdown of fund balance. In addition, we have a few projects that we've moved up on the list to occur in this fiscal year that have been previously addressed. Denny's going to talk about a project, and Doug, this evening on East 3rd Street as far as the street replacement. In addition, we have also previously upgraded West 9th Street that we have in the budget that was previously approved by the council for $220,000. And finally, city administration, once we get to the airport division this evening, is going to be proposing that we hard surface the entrance road at the Pella Municipal Airport as well. All those improvements is about $1 million, but when we draw down the fund balance, we've had a lot of discussions on what should be the fund balance for the road use tax fund. Road use tax, we generate or receive right around $1.4 million. So that $500,000 level is probably about where the minimum fund balance is what we should have in it. We've also looked at it as if we did have an unexpected street repair, where would we have those reserves at? A block of street is about anywhere from $300,000 to $400,000 depending on the year. And so it gets down to that $500,000 level. So we feel good with the fund balance of what we have proposed. We've also have a very aggressive capital improvement program that we're going to be discussing this evening for 2025. Mandy, let's go ahead. And before we do, I wanted just to briefly get council up to speed on a key contributing source of road improvements in our community, and that's the local option sales and services tax fund. And I want to make sure council is aware with the new loss tax, we'll start off with this, and this was recently approved by the voters of Pella. One of the eligible categories was road improvements or street improvements, and what we have for next year is projected revenues of $1,667,000. Included in this budget is transferring half of the funds from that revenue source over to the road use tax fund to support street improvements that we're going to be talking about this evening on it. And that leaves us with a balance of roughly $1,086,000. And we did something very similar last year for the 6 months of the new tax on it as well. So technically, this almost $1.1 million is available to support the long-term facility plan. Council chooses to do so. And we've just always assumed that's going to be a part of the budget deliberations on the long-term facility fund. But to date, from January 1st, 2024, when the new tax went into, we're projecting through June 30th, 2025, we will be transferring half of the funds over to the road use tax fund to support street improvements. The other item I wanted to talk about was the previous road lost tax that expired on December 31st, 2023. we still had a balance at roughly $801,000 at the end of that tax. What we're proposing for this year is using $360,000 of that for property tax relief. What that leaves us with is a remaining balance of $401,000. And what I'd like to make council aware of with the $401,000 is we look forward on a go-forward basis. You heard about one of the projects last night that's over budget, and that's the tulip torn repairs. We were funding that with local option sales and services tax. We had $170,000 budgeted for that repair. Estimated cost are $350,000, and it may mean that we may need some contingency funds. So that's a good source of funds for that improvement, and we may need to tap into that as well. The last item I wanted to make sure council was aware was the Marion County redistribution, and that's the 8% that Marion County of sales and services tax that Marion County redistributes to the city of Pella. On an annual basis, that's right around $440,000. Traditionally, we've used that redistribution for property tax relief, and that's also what's included in the budget, as well as using the $440,000 for property tax relief as well. So the local option, the takeaway is a key contributor to road improvements in the city of Pella. And since inception of the tax, we propose to transfer half of the funds over to support road improvements, and the other half would be available for the community center in the proposed indoor recreation center as well. So let's transition into street department. Very similar operating budget, what you've seen throughout these presentations, right around a 3.5% increase as far as expenditures. Let's go ahead to street projects. And Danny, we have a lot of street projects here. There's a lot of infrastructure. This budget is very heavy into infrastructure for not only this year, but throughout the capital improvement plan. And so what I would say is if we could focus on discuss anyway, answer any questions council may have, but the bigger projects that we have listed here for next year. And once again, from a total standpoint, it's a significantly heavy street infrastructure budget. So Denny and Doug, feel free to begin your process or your overview of the capital improvement program.
Yeah, I'll just start from the top down. It's easiest. At East 3rd, we do have that under design with garden. Things keep popping up. We're adding to that one. That hopefully we'll see how other bids come in. That'll hopefully be this year. Independence may slip a little bit into next summer. We'll just see how that one goes. Central Business District, that's when you see Chip Terpstra have to replace some brick and a scramble right before tulip time. We always try to do that in spring, get the worst of the worst trip hazards. And then our guys in-house, we replace some of the trees that are dying and start over with new grates in that number. Sidewalk, bicycle, we're friendly on the ramps. When there's ramps failing, even if it's a residential property, City of Pella, we pick those up and redo the ramps as Gerald and his group are doing a sidewalk program. So, gosh, I don't know, we did 36 or 46 of them last summer. We did a lot of those. No, that's trail.
Okay.
That's county down in there. That was county.
That's ours, part of the way down, isn't it?
From the South Boss entrance back into town. We did share that project with them, 2-3 years ago already. So that's been recently rehabbed. Now we've had a lot of underground contractors driving on it, so we'll see what it looks like when it gets rained on and cleaned off. But we may have some damage repairs there. Street tree removal, that was the ash. We're hopefully getting to the end of those, but it just seems like we have a lot of right of way back in front yards where there's trees, and as soon as they're dying, there are trees, of course, and we're friendly that way. The city, if it's in the right of way, it's dead, dying, or diseased, we do take them down. And we really do get good prices here in Pella. We have enough competition in that business now. Yeah, that university, that's an overlay, an ACC, and actually that next 360 belongs over with it. We're gonna do the airport road first, and those are both ACC overlays, so they'll be in the same year. There may be a few other stray blocks added to those. We always try to lump those together about every 3rd year, so those two numbers actually belong together. Of course, university, we've talked about that one a lot. That's a big number. Broadway is on the street out for bids. Good news is Jack's had 3 bids in the last couple weeks in smaller, similar projects, of course not with the brick. One town he had 9 bids, one he had 10, another one had 11. So there's a lot of interest out there right now. And then we've had 22 plan holders pull plans. We think there's 9 generals in that on our Broadway project. So we'll see how those numbers come in. there's an important piece of equipment, street sweeper, spring and fall. You know, in the fall, we try to pick up the leaves where they get in storm sewer, and in the spring, we try to pick up the sand that we spread over the winter.
Hey, Danny, I gotta tell you this story.
Go ahead.
When you say street sweeper. So I walk a lot. I get pickups pulling driveways in front of me because they want to tell me something. But I had a guy stop me Monday, tell me that when he was a little kid, he dreamt about driving a street sweeper, so he was wondering if he could volunteer to drive the street sweeper, so I gave him your number.
Has he called us?
It was volunteer basis. I said, well, there probably is gonna be a liability issue, but you may get a call, from somebody that wants to
Okay.
run a street sweeper.
We'll see if Manny can insure it.
Anyway, that was quite an interesting story.
Yeah, okay. All right, just talk to him then. It's a little monotonous, a little hard on your neck, because you're always looking out that window. Of course,
Dreamed of being a fireman.
Yeah, I wanted to run a street sweeper.
those garage doors in the shop have a lot of age on them, so we're trying to do one every other year. They've gotten expensive. Oskaloosa Street, that's STP money, so it'll actually be the summer of '25. There's no way that'll get started. That takes a DOT bid letting. And we're scared, we'll do some preliminary counts. We pulled traffic signals out of that for now as a thought. We probably don't need warrants, and you can't use projections. You have to have actual warrants to spend STP money. But that project will include 3-lane and on out from 16th through the intersection, maybe 250, 300 feet, and then 3-lane both north-south. So the pavement will at least be there, the turn lanes will be there. If we don't do traffic signals, we may at least get some conduit from one side to the other on all 4 sides and be ready for them someday. 218th, otherwise known as West 9th, we actually need to do that renaming officially someday. We've got 2 or 3 of those in town that we need to officially bring to council someday. That's one of them. Lincoln Street, that's one we beat to death tonight. The street, we're gonna hook Doug for some of that money, I guess. Dump truck, that's another big one. Of course, we have 5 major routes. So that's, the truck that has the front plow, the belly plow, the wing plow, and the sander in the back. And if you ever want to ride one of those cabs and see how much is going on, it's impressive, the stress those guys are under. And then if you're in poor visibility and you got cars around you that aren't behaving, and it's a tough job. I would not do it. I used to run a pickup once in a while with a blade, and that's 10, 12 hours, that's enough. You're seeing things cross the road in front of you that aren't. It's just, you get snow blind. But anyway, the bad news on that is the chassis are hard to, the international folks, which us, DOT, everybody's been running the internationals for a lot of years. The Macs are a lot more expensive. They're talking like 2 years out now on ordering things. So somewhere, something's got to give in that economy or that supply chain. That's just not working. We've been buying based off of Sourcewell, and that's been working for us pretty well because DOT does not do state bid anymore. Most of the states around us and communities are basing on a Sourcewell contract. And a lot of these places are beating Sourcewell numbers, so everybody's happy. We've got a bunch of these other blocks out there ways. Like I say, those numbers might not be as rock solid. We'll see how these bids come in now that we're hearing. But I know for sure, or we know for sure, what are we being told on a yard of concrete? C4 is
up and under 15%.
Which is 200 now?
It's getting close to.
Right at $200 a yard. Remember, wasn't that long ago, we were paying 70, 65. If we need M4 fast secure, it's more than that. So, that's just one of the pieces. Of course, if we got a lot of steel in our paving too. West Washington, that would be Quick Start. Actually had a conversation with them today. They're trying to schedule a meeting with us, and they are not opposed to cost sharing. Of course, we haven't talked any percentages yet, but they commonly do, and they're very willing to sit down in the next couple of weeks. They want to start talking about that. I did warn them of what the number is, according to our 10,000-foot estimate from our consultant. So if we want to refine that, we got to pay a couple thousand more to Snyder to refine that. But that's probably the west side we did, 4 or 5 years ago. Similar, almost the same turn lines, same signals, and it was 640. So, we'll take a 30-some% increase since then. So it's probably not a bad number.
I assume the community center alley would be, if the community center, the latest of cutting down the addition, that should all be done together.
We think so, and Jeanette's and I, we'll see how what that design includes on the east side of the building.
Okay.
We might be in each other's way.
Oh,
You know, there was a grand plan at one time, putting, Mayor's not here either, there was gonna be a skywalk at one time in this redesign. Now, maybe that's dead, but when she was talking at the second floor and they were redoing it, there was a skywalk involved. So, there she is. No skywalk right now, right? Okay. So, yeah, we'll keep an eye on that. If it makes sense, absolutely.
yeah.
We've got a local contractor that's now very familiar with how to do those. So, that brick lane's always interesting. Speaking of brick, that Broadway, give Doug credit, and thank Chandler's group, we put a bunch of his summer help, our summer help together for what, 5 days? All we did is promise some pizza on Friday. And Casey's Pizza, and I come out of Casey's Pizza with 13 pizzas one morning. Thanks, a lot of our full-time guys, of course, they joined in. They didn't want those young kids eating along. So they took a lot of pizza. But unfortunately, we may have, what, 25 to 30,000 on pallets?
Pretty close to a street's worth, which is almost 50,000.
Yeah, so, and we need
For a
90-some,
31-footer.
for that project, we need 90-some thousand bricks cleaned and put on pallets. The guys did devise a new way. We borrowed what I call a screen, heavy-duty screen, where we cleaned the whole pile and hauled 6 loads of debris that just fell off. 6, 7 truckloads of debris. So we got a lot of the cleaning done with the end loader and this screen, which was a great idea. Give Doug and his guys credit for coming up with that. And you don't have the mess quite. But as they pick up an individual brick, and I don't know if you ever picked up our street bricks, they're heavy. It'll give you carpal tunnel on a couple. I mean, it's, you've got, before the day's over, you're using 2 hands. Because just that grip right down in here. So it's not an easy task. I don't know how many we put on each pallet. It's
480.
480 on each pallet. And we've had to, years ago, we palleted a bunch up and then the pallets rotted. So now we've had to come up with a new plan. We've been buying plastic pallets and new pallets and borrowing pallets. But for 90, so we've still got 60-some thousand. So there again, you can come down, you can ride through the sewers, you can clean bricks for a couple of hours.
Drive street sweepers.
Drive street
Yeah, drive street sweepers.
Venture lane.
Any other questions on streets? We can talk about it all night if you want to, but Mandy forgot to start my timer. I know.
Where'd you get the bricks? Where'd they come from?
They've been recycled.
Recycle?
We've got a lot of streets that have asphalt overlay that have brick underneath, you have no
Oh,
idea. Well,
okay.
Broadway itself, we believe, has brick underneath.
Oh.
So in the contract, they will load that up, bring it to our shop in the back, and
Oh, what's
We'll
there
make it a
now,
pile.
what's there now is brick underneath, huh?
Yep.
Oh, okay.
And then that asphalt does pop off decent
Mhm.
over time. But,
East First has brick underneath it from Liberty to Oskaloosa,
Oh.
and it's wide,
Oh.
31 foot.
Hmm.
so someday when we harvest that, there's
That's a lot of
a lot of
pizza.
brick. It's a lot of pizza.
What are they worth on the market these days?
Anywhere from $4 to $7.
I remember 3.
Yeah.
So we won't have to buy any new brick.
No, and we had an offer, I don't know if many of you listened to, was it 98.7, Albia Sheraton, a couple of years ago, they were trying to get rid of, forget how many thousand. And I wheeled and dealed on the phone a couple of times, and we just never did get together to get our trucks down there and load them up, but we probably should have.
Brick.
Down the streets?
Yep.
There wasn't a total at the bottom there.
Yeah, Mandy, if you can go back to the total, it's massive.
Oh, here we go.
$11.7 million of street improvements in FY '25. So again, I think you'll find a healthy street budget throughout the 5-year CIP on it overall. So again, there's, want to stress in 2025, significant investments in infrastructure all across the board from electric, water, wastewater, and streets.
Yeah,
Well,
we did. Go ahead.
Well, I'd say you point out the excess TIF dollars that gets spent on streets. We get a lot of static about TIFs, but City of Pella's benefited quite well from a lot of TIF projects over the years that have allowed to do a lot of infrastructure.
Yeah, that's a very good point, Mayor. We've used the TIF revenues that we've been able to generate very successfully to reinvest in our infrastructure as well, and that's been a key item for the city, so.
I guess we didn't mention that CBD streetscape, we're showing it out 5 years to kind of keep it alive. That's 2 blocks of Franklin, the best number I could come up without paying to have it done. Part of the reason there is that water main there is probably, may even be pre-1900. We believe it's old. You know, and it's rock solid, yeah, but there's been some service problems and so on and so forth, so. At some point, that, we're gonna disturb that street either way, with water main. And there's a lack of storm sewer. Of course, in the west block, that causes that tall curb that we've had a lot of trips and falls on it. That extroverted handicap ramp in front of Yarsmus. But there's no storm sewer to handle that, so that'd be that fixed. That's what it costs.
Are we allowed a naming right or something for that CBD streetscape, for instance? Could that be so-and-so plaza?
I won't go down that path, I guess, but you know, a lot of it talks to design, and this is just me reiterating where we were kind of at one point, is the center 24 to 30 feet would be back to brick, and the angle parking would be PC, but there would be the sidewalks, the goal was to make them a little wider, and there's been some bump outs here, and benches and planters, and then there's gonna be a big argument that we'll have to go through someday, do we put brick back, because brick can be slick when it's wet. You know, it's imploding now after 30 years, it's imploding from the bottom up with all this sand, salt. So there's a lot of discussion there, and you know, if we were to do that, one design we've kicked around, I know we've got drawings, we were pinching the intersections, so the crosswalks were shorter, so you can have less time to get people across. Because we get complaints, the one at Washington and Maine, we've set it to 13 seconds and it keeps going back to 8. And Nate can better describe that, it's old, equipment's old. But you can't get across there in 8, and you need 11 to 13. I think we put 11 or 12 for a while, and then it slips back to 8. It's not enough.
It's short,
Yeah.
even for people who walk fast, you know, I mean, even for kids.
Much of the street budget really correlates with utility deficiency, whether it's undersized water main or sewer that's showing up, or really ultimately even aesthetics.
Yeah, and it does dictate. I have asked, and hopefully I can share with you in another month or two, CERTA staff, that's our RPA association that I'm a member of. Doug's the backup for me. There's actually a split now. We're joining a planning group with Gerald and his group, and we're splitting away from the Des Moines MPO. But then CERTA staff, the people that will be able to work for us, he can finish an analysis of ours from that state inspection that they do every other year. And we have numbers for every street, from 0 to 100. 100 being a brand new street, 0 being back to gravel or junk. And I've asked him to update that. We can hire them by the hour, and Andrew's working on that as we speak. But he's in the middle of moving offices too out to West Des Moines. So hopefully in a couple months I can have that and we'll have it printed for him. And unfortunately, as Doug mentioned, where I was headed with this, sometimes the worst streets, we have to replace one over here because the sewer under it's older and it's failing. It's like, why'd you do this street? This one looks a lot better than that one over there. You know, some of these little blocks we got at this tail end of the list, they're horrible. We think they'll stay in their place, but they could get bumped yet because we've got sewers that are failing or water main that are failing, and that's going to dictate. And that's common in the Midwest, so we're not unique.
Thank you. Let's switch gears and talk about the Pella Municipal Airport. What I would like to state is that with the regional airport, we will be scheduling very soon an update on the regional airport, but essentially the decision the city council will have to make is whether it's feasible to continue on with the regional airport or whether we should focus our attention on the Pella Municipal Airport. The CIP that we have this evening is, even if the decision is to continue on and it's feasible to continue on with the regional airport, we will have to make investments in the Pella Municipal Airport because it could take a number of years to actually build the regional airport. What we have proposed with the CIP for the Pella Municipal Airport, if you recall, this past year and the current year, We actually have a master plan for the Pella Municipal Airport. What's currently waiting is a decision on the regional airport before we have received FAA authorization to proceed with that. We're still in the process. Once that decision is made, if the decision is made to move on and focus on the Pella Municipal Airport, we have received assurances that we can proceed with our master plan at the airport. And why that's important is some of the items such as the runway improvements, apron improvements, and some of the other, I'd say, land infrastructure, those would be identified in the master plan, and they'll show up in actually in our 5-year plan. What we have listed in the CIP this evening is items that I feel that if the airport, even if the regional airport, we continue on with the project and focus on that, some of these items, the airport's going to need to be in service until the new regional airport is built. One of the items that we have is the current airport entrance road. This has been a request of the airport committee for a number of years. We're proposing to put it in the budget. Denny has an estimate that's up from what we've typically seen. About $150,000 is the number I think we've been used to seeing on it. Now we're up to $375 on what we have here on that. The second item that we have is a request from the airport committee as well, and this is an equipment, a very important piece of equipment for the airport. It's the replacement of the tractor out at the airport. That is something, if we were to move the airport, that we would be able to continue and bring that piece of equipment with us as well. Based on the last time I believe we had the tractor replacement, Denny, I think it took us about a year to develop the specs for the FAA replacement program on that as well. So again, with some of the items that we have, master plan is located the current year, and then we've also had some funding available for terminal improvements that we'll be doing in the current year as well. So with that, Denny, if there's anything additional to add to the airport CIP?
Well, I know it's critical too. We have some issues with the runway lights, and I don't know, I think it's 30-some years old or even older. Shane's been limping them along, and that's something we can't mess with. So we're gonna look at getting some bids as an emergency repair. Unfortunately, they're openers in the 15 to 20 range, but they're telling us we're crazy. It's more like 40 to 50. So there's only 2 or 3 contractors in the state. We'll be getting with them to. We can't afford to have those lights out at night, of course. Yeah, other than that, I think Mike's covered it. The road changed. It was always only 1,700 feet, 4 inches thick. And not knowing how many years it's got to last, I went to a 6-inch, 24-foot top, 2-foot rock shoulders, and took care of the corporate hangars, and it's 2,600 feet long. So that's, everybody gets pavement with the 375. And that's a good number. I got it from Alex at Garden. They bid some asphalt. So that should cover that. 2,600, 24 wide, 60. Unless oil prices go through the roof.
Okay.
Any more airport questions?
When do you expect some of these decisions are going to be made that we'll be looking at this? Because I think Shane is probably the most patient man on the planet. And, you know, I'm becoming increasingly concerned about the condition of the airport. And
Our goal is April. I'm sorry for
April
cutting,
of
I'm sorry
this
for
year?
cutting, yes.
Okay,
Yes.
well, that gives me some comfort. So you'll have numbers in front of us and.
We'll have information in front of you to be able, we hope to make an informed decision. That's the goal.
Awesome.
That's what we're working for.
Okay.
Yeah.
I
We're just-
appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think clarity on this issue would be beneficial for all
Oh, yeah.
involved. So. Okay, before Denny scoots out, let's talk solid waste here. But we have here just a very brief CIP. We're proposing a 10% increase in solid waste fees. And it's been a number of years since we've increased the solid waste fees. And the big issue is not the big issue, but with our contract last year, we awarded a 4.8% increase to the contractor. And I would say Midwest Sanitation provides excellent service to the city of Pella. With the proposed budget recommendation for their contract, if you recall, it's tied to the general employment increase or wage increase given to all city employees, which is currently at 2%. So we have the contractor fees going up close to 7%. What we're trying to do, the method to the madness is is ideally we'd like to get this fund balance up to about 100,000 on it. And the reason for that is if we ever ran into a problem with the contractor and we had to go out and find another contractor to replace them on it and provide the service, we feel that if we got to 100,000, that would be about 2 months worth of contract hauling fees, and we would make a transition over to new providers. So if you were to look at the minimum required fund balance, I'd tell you the goal would be just to get there to the 100. As you can see, we're not quite there, and we'll be building it up slowly over time, but that's the goal. 10% is about, Brian, $1.80, $2 to the typical residential customer per month on it. And once again, it's been a number of years since we've increased solid waste fees at the city. So with that, is there any questions on the solid waste utility?
I just had a couple quick questions on totes. We've been having, and this is a great problem to have with all Pella's growth. We're constantly ordering and then they're backward forever, and now we're almost out again. We just got a whole semi-load. And Midwest helped us get them home, I believe, and we're out again, so we're ordering large totes. But before as I drive around town, I see a lot of recycled totes sitting in backyards and garages that nobody ever uses. And I'd really like to put it in the newsletter that, hey, if you think you're just never gonna use it, we'd love to come pick it up before we go and order. I don't know whether we're up to $85, $90 a piece, I believe. And it just to see what I think is 200 or 300 sitting out there, and I'm not sure there's hope they'll ever use them. And I'm sure a lot of people like to get them out of their garage, but I know that's going against the green movement, where if they don't have one, they for sure won't recycle, but why would we spend another $7,000 or $8,000 on half a semi-load of these things with yellow tops that are sitting in backyards? So if nobody cares, we're gonna have one of these newsletters, we're gonna get that squeezed in, that call Public Works and we'd be glad to pick them up.
Just in case we're not lucky with that, Danny, I think you've just blown a hole through my fund balance plans.
Sorry.
All righty. Okay, no problem. All right, and Mayor, if there's no further questions, this gets to the interactive section of the meeting on it. And if you recall, when we started the budget deliberations, we said there's going to be a series of questions, and I don't mean to be pressing on this item, but the reality is, Brian, help me out. The budget hearing for the city 2025 budget and capital improvement plan is on April 16th, correct? We have to certify to the state on April 30th. If we get to the budget hearing and the budget does not pass, we do not have enough time to recertify the budget. What that means is I'm going to be asking very pressing questions on the series of questions we're going to go through, and if there's any no's, concerns, we would like to discuss them and see if we can reconcile it and figure out a way to move forward on it. So please don't be shy, share your concerns. If there's anything, any thoughts you have, questions, anything that would cause you to vote no on April 16th, please bring it to our attention now. We'd like to discuss it and see if we could address those concerns. So let's go ahead, please, Mandy. Once again, we have a total budget of $69.5 million here, slight increase in reserves of nearly $300,000 for the city of Pella on it, and that's kind of a nice segue to our first question that we have. Mandy, let's go ahead and fire the first one off. For the first time in 22 years, we're proposing to increase the city's property tax rate from $10.20 up to $10.75. It's attributed to three factors. The first factor is in 2022, we took over an essential service for the city of Pella, the Pella Ambulance. Brian has an operating subsidy of right around $598,000 on it. The second issue that we've had this year is property insurance. We've seen a drastic increase at the city of Pella for the general fund. It was nearly $200,000, and that's unprecedented for the city. The third item is, in addition to the property tax legislation that went into effect this year, we received state funding cuts of nearly $46,000. So with this increase up from 1020 to 1075, those are the reasons what we're proposing for the increase for this year, and that is the operating levy increase. And what we'd like to ask Mr. Mayor is if there's any concerns with increasing the city's property tax levy.
Okay. Well, I don't vote, so I got to hear what your questions or what you think.
I don't know that we really have an option. The ambulance and the property tax and the state, I don't like it, but I don't know that we have an option.
I think this question should be asked last, because we have a lot of issues to talk about, all that would affect the top property taxes. And to just say yes or no right now, well, I'd say no, I'm not interested in raising property taxes, but there might still be a reason in here to raise them when we get done. So that's kind of what that's just what I think.
'Cause remember, with the tax levy, there's also gonna be an increase in assessment. So there'd probably be this increase plus the assessment increase.
Yeah, well, let me, Mr. Mayor, and I guess I would ask the council, if you'd like, we could defer this question to the last question that I'll ask, if that's fine. Mandy, what I would also ask is in the budget letter, we also walked through an example of the 18% tax increase that most people saw on their assessed values on January 1st, 2023. And what we've seen with that, and we'll get to that question here, is basically the residential rollback for this next year wiped out that entire increase, we believe, for most people in Pella. But we'll go over that example once we go to the property tax here very soon. So, Mandy, if we could go back to question number 2, and I'll make sure I talk about that as well.
Okay,
so
thank you.
Okay. Item number 2 is we have a 10% increase in solid waste fees for the city of Pella. Are there any concerns with increasing solid waste fees? For most residences, this is going to be about $1.80 a month.
No.
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 Okay. Let's go ahead, please, Mandy. Maintaining existing rates for all other utility services for next year. This would be electric, water, wastewater, and telecommunications.
Now, there was a comment about raising rates. What was that? There is either a little bit every year or big bumps.
Yeah, not to confuse the matter, in the current budget, we had a 7% increase in water rates that we had.
Yeah.
And we're going to be actually addressing that ordinance for this spring on it. As a part of this, and what Denny and Brent alluded to, is the system, there could be potential additional capital improvements for the city's well system on it and treatment options. What we're going to evaluate was the 7% and any future increases that we may need on this, that we may propose that in the future, not necessarily for this fiscal year, but future years. So in other words, when we get to FY26, so that would be the fiscal year that would start on July 1st, 2025, we're planning on having the discussion for future rate increases. Is it better to have an annual rate increase of, say, 2 to 3% to account for some sort of revenue growth for these utilities versus a 10% increase in the future?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the evaluation that we plan to do. So.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
So for this, I'd say yes.
Okay. Mayor?
Well, could questions 2's answer be somewhat dependent on question 1 answer?
What's that?
Could question 2's answer be dependent on question 1's answer?
Question 2.
Not necessarily. For 2, the solid waste and whether property taxes, they're unrelated on that. So they're separate, distinct operations. So property taxes would not impact the solid waste fund, and the solid waste fund would not impact property taxes.
Sure, but the question about other utility rates, that would also be helpful to accomplish some of the things we need to accomplish in our CIP.
Yes.
If question 1 is answered a certain way.
Yeah, no, now I understand, Dr. Carlstone. And so I think what I heard, and that's a very good point, is if you look at the city's general fund and just factor in property tax legislation, it's a very, looking at this objectively, if you were to look at the next 4 to 5 years, there's a very good thought in mind that we may have to diversify our revenue base, and there may be increased what I would call franchise fees from the utilities to support general fund operations on it. And not only necessarily city utility fees, but there's also utilities that are non-city of Pella that operate in the city's right-of-way as well. And a lot of cities have franchise fees for those utilities as well. So that's a very good point, Dr. Carlstone. If there's a way potentially to increase franchise fees for utilities to help support general fund services. So I'll make sure we talk about that with the property tax question. Alrighty. Let's go ahead, please, Mandy, and we'll touch also. Brian, if you could take down my notes to remind us that we're going to 1 and 3 together. What we have for item number 4 is the compensation for city employees. If you recall, we talked about 2-step increases. Well, not 2 steps. There's 2 parts to employee compensation for most employees at the city of Pella. One of them is what we call the general wage adjustment. And then there's also the merit increase. And the merit increase is a step system that's usually about 3%. If we award a 2% wage adjustment plus the step increase, most employees at the city of Pella would receive a 5% increase on that for compensation next year. The exception would be for employees that may be at top of scale, then they would receive just the wage increase, would get about 2% increase. What we have in the budget is a wage increase of 2%, and we're budgeting for step increases. The total compensation adjustment for city employees is $362,000, and we said overall it's close to a 5% increase, and most employees will receive right around a 5% increase. We also have, for the police department, 1 new position that's 100% funded through a crisis intervention grant that we have for the city of Pella on it. So that's 1 new position, or a new position that we have for next year. In addition, with the staffing adjustments, what we discussed was the Pella Community Ambulance and doing an operational assessment, or I call it an organizational assessment. And ultimately, what we're trying to get to is when you look at the service calls that the ambulance is going on, we heard Chief Gregg talk about 2,200 service runs. You look at their geographical area, and then you factor in the hospital transfer request that they've been making. The key item is how many employees should we have staffed and how many ambulances should we have in operation for the community. That's part of the evaluation. The other aspect of this evaluation would be is to articulate the cost of serving the rural townships as well as performing hospital transfers as well. So with that, that is the proposed operational budget or staffing budget for the city of Pella. Are there any concerns?
Do we know how many years that crisis intervention grant runs?
3. It's
3.
3.
3?
Yep. So does this, I remember hearing that we needed 4 more EMS personnel to fully
Yes.
staff.
Well, let me take a step back. That's a part of the operational assessment. That's the 4 ambulances, what's been communicated to me, the 4 personnel is if we needed a 4th ambulance on it, there could be a need for an additional 4. Before I'm willing to recommend any more paramedics on it, I feel we need to know what the end game is. How many people should we have? And that's why we're doing the operational assessment. Very good point, Mr. Butler. By doing the operational assessment, we may have to evaluate the manpower for the Pella Community Ambulance and add staffing after one is complete.
Well, and there was talk about a Sprinter ambulance, a smaller vehicle, and, we're putting that off a year. I don't know if that's a good idea or not. Can't pull that forward.
Yeah.
And
It's a very good thought, and that may indeed happen. I believe with the Sprinter or the transfer, I'm looking for Chief Gregg. I'm not sure we have any EMS people here, but based off my memory, and Brian helped me out, but I believe that was a private source contribution. Yeah.
They've submitted a grant for it,
Yeah.
so that project would be 100% grant funded if awarded.
Yeah. And that's something that we have talked with the hospital about too, and so that very well may happen, but right now it's being proposed to be funded by some other source other than the city of Pella.
So secondarily dependent on the operational assessment too.
Yeah. I think when we start talking about the ambulance, I think the operational assessment is step 1 we need to do, and here's why. Because, we inherited this thing a couple years ago in an emergency situation. Those of us that were involved knew we rushed. We had to get it done by July 1 of 2022, and so it was a very rushed operation that we took over because we needed to provide the service. So there's, number one, I think we should, from our standpoint, is do an operational assessment, because our responsibility is to make sure we run it as efficiently as we can, because we are going to be, at some point, probably promoting, as a city of Pella, we're going to be promoting a essential services tax countywide. And so our responsibility, in my opinion, there is to make sure that our operation or ambulance doesn't cost any more than it has to. And so I think we need to do that assessment first to make sure that the dollars we're spending, especially if we end up with an essential services tax countywide, that we would need to champion for it to pass. So I think we need to make sure we know exactly what we're running.
I agree that we should know that because we gotta be efficient. When is the, did I sleep through something? I don't remember hearing about doing an operational assessment.
No, it was in we discussed the operational assessment during the work session.
We did?
Councilmember
Okay.
Justin Butler, yes.
Well, I don't think I was asleep, but.
Well, we also put it in the budget letter too, but there's a lot of information in it, just to be clear. From my standpoint, it's challenging for me to sit and say, 2 paramedics, this is what's needed on it. I feel that if there is someone that, the big thing is right now I believe we have roughly 13 paramedics, but from my standpoint, I don't know based off the service level demands, the transfers, the geographical area that we're serving, that should be 13, 15, or 17 on it. And that's what I'd like to know is the end game, what we have, and that's what we're trying to find out.
Okay, so that will come from somebody else.
Yeah, we're gonna hire a consultant to go down and look at that and also
okay.
look, so that'll
All
be
right.
a part of it, but that's the ultimate goal.
Thank you.
I have a question about and hopefully my voice will hold out, about this 2% salary increase. I know that we took a survey, and most of us, through the survey, agreed that we wanted a higher percentile. And while I understand that we have a step system, I also reflect back on last year when multiple people did not receive raises, and they were heads of our department that had dedicated a long number of years to serving our community. And I just feel that, we went through this last year, and last year I believe we had 21 people reapply and have us review this process. What makes us think that that won't happen again this year? I mean, why don't we preemptively go with what was voiced on the survey? That's my confusion.
Yeah, very good point. Let me answer your question on that survey. If you'll notice on some of what I call the split votes on here, most of them were 4-3. From my perspective, 3 means trouble on it. To get anything passed at the city, you have to have 2 elements. You have to have 4 council members support most of the items that support spending money. That's a resolution or an ordinance, and you also have to have the mayor's support. So anytime you see 4-3 on a survey, it means it could be potential issues. The second issue is I'm not opposed to what I would say if we're going to award a wage adjustment, we ought to have some index to measure it by. What we have is the ECI, and that was roughly the number quoted, but that is total compensation. Our total compensation that we're proposing is 5% on what we have for most employees. But if council's desire to increase and go higher than the 2%, we need to keep a couple things in mind. For the general fund department with state property tax legislation, our revenues likely are going to be capped from an operational standpoint of somewhere between 2 to 3%. If we have wage increases that are higher, let's say 3-4% plus step increases, and we start getting up to 6 to 7, that could lead to further deficits in the general fund on it. So while we're not opposed to it, We don't have that budgeted for, and so we likely, question number one on the 1075, if we increase that, we could be looking at a higher operating levy that's going to be proposed as well. So not opposed to it if council would like to consider that. But I also want to make clear on that survey, anything that was a 4-3 on it could lead to, and from my standpoint, is not a clear mandate on it.
Mandy, would there be, it seems to me a 5% increase would be kind of in line with, could you, off the top of your head, know how many people would not get, because it says an average, so.
Yeah, there's 15 employees right now that are top of scale, so approximately 15% of the workforce.
But everyone else would get the 2 plus the,
Yes.
would get the 5.
Of those 15, and you might not be able to tell us, what's the average? Sorry, my cough dropped. What's the average number of years of service to the community of those 15?
I did not pull those numbers, but I can tell you by looking at the list, it's
Just
probably 20 plus years.
per,
Yeah,
per
on
person.
average, yeah.
Which is why they're probably at top of scale at this point. Just 'cause of
Yeah.
service.
Okay. But they gave a lot of years to this community, a lot of dedication. Just gathering facts.
Yeah.
So for the sake of this discussion, and the question that you're asking, I'm in favor of it as you have it, Mike. Not that we won't need to revisit this again next year or, you know, whatever, but, you know, as you have it set up.
Is there room to make adjustments like we did
Yeah.
last year?
Well, I would say what we could do, keep in mind, all these items are just the budget. Most of these items are going to require a separate vote by the council. And in the case of employee wages, what we typically do, if you recall, is we come back in June, sometimes it's May. We have a policy and planning work session. We have more data on it. We have a separate session that's dedicated just to employee wages on it. So we could always do that, and if council chooses to go higher at that time, don't like to state this, I mean, you know, we might be able to make adjustments at that time, but that would be June, so it'd be a couple months down the road if you'd like to reevaluate this, but this is just the budget on that we have.
If we can reevaluate this, then I'm fine with it.
I'm fine with this, but I would like to see us craft a little something more for those that are at top of scale. 15 or 20, or however many people that is. Or that'd be 3%.
Yeah. You know, I think it makes a lot of sense, and this is something, and Mandy's done a bang-up job, and we have a lot of items on our list from an HR standpoint. But, you know, if you had longevity bonuses or, you know, just something, I think that recognizes the years of service and the value that those employees bring to the city of Pella, I think it'd go a long ways in it as well. I would also state, well, for the record, with the state property tax reform that's gone into place, we may have to, in a few years, to take a look at our entire compensation system again, just under the circumstances. So keep that in mind. But what we will do is, Brian and Mandy, if we can mark this down, that we will make sure we will come back and schedule that work session in June and reevaluate it.
I take a lot of comfort in the fact that Mandy will be involved, if not spearheading that, so thank you.
Okay, let's go ahead, please. Let's go ahead and talk about the department capital improvement plans that we're going to show. We're going to go through these very briefly, and here's the rule. Unless I hear no, stop, we're going to probably keep going, so make sure you speak up on it. So first item, and I'll give you an opportunity because we're all in this together, and we don't want to have any surprises on April 16th. So let's go ahead with the first one. What I'd like to point out is just once again in this budget, there's roughly $8.3 million of bond issues in here. How bond issues work is they're going to be issued sometime in FY '24-25, and that's only if council authorizes these projects. There'll be separate votes on each and every one of these projects that are listed up here. If we choose to proceed with them, and if at that time we evaluate it, we choose to issue general obligation debt, there's a whole nother set of approvals that are necessary from the city council. So the long story short is because I believe I heard one of the council members mention, if they haven't a time or two, that the government moves at a snail's speed at times. These bond issues tend to lag. So if they're issued next year, they will hit the debt service levy in 25-26. Council went and approved everything, and we're issuing debt for these projects up here, and nothing changes. We could see a debt service levy increase of $1.15 in FY '25-26. We're simply bringing these projects to your council's attention. Are there any concerns with potentially issuing debt for any of these projects that we have listed up here on the board?
Well, I will say this. I have a problem of borrowing money for 20 years to do maintenance that should be made out of current cash. That's a problem I have. And not all those projects fall in that category, but some of them do.
Yeah.
And so, if we're not approving them, we're not doing it, we're just saying, well, it's a way of getting it. It might be a way of doing it, but it might not.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, to clarify, the debt service schedule on some of these projects, Brian, I think you have over 10 years.
The majority are all 10 years.
Yeah.
okay,
So-
10 years. Even that, I mean, repaired a memorial building. Everybody that owns something knows every so many years you got to put a new roof on. I mean, it's just like we got to start thinking about maintaining stuff without having to finance the maintaining of it. That's what I think. I mean,
Dave, what's the life of a roof?
15 to 20 years.
Yeah.
So I say, make perhaps a different way to look at this, John. Pick any of these issues, the city's gonna finance every single one of these, one way or the other. Either you're gonna finance it initially, and every year we're putting money in the bank, and we're gonna, let's just pick University Street, for instance. Let's say that every year, whatever our debt service would be for University Street, let's just say it's whatever, it's $1 million a year that we need to, it's $500,000 a year that we need to put away for that. So in 10 years, we can put that street in with cash. What we've done is we've now eliminated 10 years of opportunity to have that street and put development around it. So, and in 10 years, the interest costs that we're gonna pay on that bond issue for University Street, we will then have to make up the difference in what the cash value is in 10 years. So we're gonna pay that interest cost whether we save it. If you know what I'm saying. We're gonna pay the value of money today versus the value of money in 10 years. We're either gonna be paying it in interest cost now on bond, or we're gonna be paying it in inflationary costs in the future. But the inflationary cost in the future doesn't give us 10 years to recoup development on it. So.
Well, I wasn't talking about the big numbers, but the
Pick
little.
any one.
Yeah, well, repairing a building, tearing down the other building. I mean, we have cash on hand, we have cash in our hands that we could do some of these projects without borrowing everything. That's what I'm saying.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I get what you're saying, John, I agree. I think some of these projects are been deferred from years past. And so we're kind of in a catch-up. The thing to remember is if we decide to pay cash, we have to be willing to deplete our fund balance a little bit to do it. Because I agree to demo the second church, you know, that's not a long-term, that's not a long-term
Improvement.
financeable.
Yeah.
So we would have to, as a council, or council would have to approve taking cash out of the fund balance to do that instead of issuing debt.
Okay, well,
A lot of these other ones are more long-term
yeah, oh, yeah.
projects that I think debt is okay for, but I agree with you. And I think that's why we need to evaluate each of these. I think what Mike is just asking is if, I don't know, we're not approving anything here.
Yeah, yeah.
Are we
Okay.
willing to have a discussion moving forward
Yeah.
about these projects? And then we can make those decisions.
Okay.
Because remember, if let's say we decide to pay to do the memorial building, yeah, again, we have two choices. We can, I think our total budget shows a $218,000 surplus, revenues over expenses. So we could choose to take it out of operations and end up with if we spent $300,000, we end up with a $100,000 deficit for the year.
Okay.
Or we can just redo, I guess it's basically the same thing. We're gonna reduce our ending fund balance one way or the other. We certainly, council will have the option to do that. I think
Okay.
what Mike is just saying, these are projects we know we need to take care of. Let's agree that we're gonna discuss them and figure it out.
Okay.
I mean, if you look at the list, you know, last night I sit here, it's easy to get a little depressed about the future because we have a lot of things. Now, I'm an optimistic guy, and so I choose to not go that way because I think there are challenges. I love challenges. I think we can figure out how to overcome those challenges. But for right now, we're just saying these are things we know we need to do. We're gonna figure it out.
Okay.
I guarantee you we're gonna figure it out. City of Pella always figures it out. We will do that. But
Okay.
I don't know why Lynn's laughing about my depression comment, but anyway.
We got the crisis intervention officer, so.
We're approving the opportunity to solve these problems later.
Yes.
One at a time.
Good way to put it.
And just a little historical perspective, years ago when I was a freshman council member, it
You can
didn't take
remember
me-
back that far?
That's a long time. I didn't even have gray hair.
3 years ago.
Yeah, but it didn't take long to discover that our city had been run very conservative fiscally for years. And it took a new council and new mayors years to play catch up. Because rather than gobble a big mouthful like this, we tried to do it out of the budget one at a time, and it took years. We were way behind.
Yeah, you know, the one regret I have over the first 4 years is I wish we'd have borrowed $30 million 2 years ago and done everything. 'Cause we were borrowing money for 1.6%. And right now, we have CDs that are earning us 5.5%. But can't go back in time. But anyway, I think hopefully we're on the same page here that we're not approving any of these expenditures, but we're gonna talk about them.
Okay.
And figure it out. Does that help, Mike, or did we muddy all the water?
No, I believe we have clarity, so
How
thank
fast
you.
were we gonna go through these?
What's that?
How fast were we gonna go through these?
Well,
Sorry.
these are important discussions, so we have to be here till 10 o'clock, be here till 10 o'clock.
This is the last item on the agenda, so there's only a few more questions left. Let's go ahead with the fire department. And again, the heavy hitter was the aerial fire truck that council previously approved. That's in 2028. Chief discussed the replacement of the bunker gear. That's going to be shared with the rural fire, Lake Prairie Fire District on a 50-50 basis. Is there any concerns with the fire department's budget?
Well, is the 50-50 basis, would we be paying half of the 165?
Yes.
So, okay, so Why don't we put that up there instead of the 165?
Yeah, it's kind of convoluted. You have to go down to the funding sources, and the rural fire department's
Okay,
chipping in
okay.
100,000, so the city shares half on these items that we have.
Okay. Got it.
Okay, let's
Looks
go ahead,
good.
please, Mandy. Police department, the big one on my list that's certainly new and is the interoperability radio project for $350,000. On it again, this is an upgrade of the dispatch. Well, actually, I should let Chief talk about the radio communication system. It's needed in Pella. We've spent a lot of time evaluating this, and again, with this, I believe the radio system is the Raycom system that we have on it, and the costs have ranged anywhere from probably the lower end of the option of $350,000 up to $1.3 million. They've been in the range of some all over the board, and this has been ongoing for 5 years. And I think Chief McShay has done a very good job of bringing this issue up and getting this issue to this point, because it's a fairly complex issue. It affects not only the police department, but the ambulance as well as the fire department. I will state from my standpoint, this is another one of these projects that should be shared by all parties that utilize the Pella dispatch. That would be the abutting townships that utilize the Pella dispatch, as well as the city of Lighton on it as well. But that's a battle for another day, and what's being proposed is spending $350,000 to upgrade the radio communication system for the public safety departments. So
This is my 5th budget session, and this item and the AMI have been like out seems like they were out 3 years for all 5 of these until this year. It's like, oh, okay. So it's good to see us taking a swing at some of these.
Good to get that whole entire radio system that Chief talked about done soon.
Yeah, what was that, another couple $100,000?
I think Chief McShay.
That's about 570.
570?
Yeah.
And then another thing I would push or suggest is bringing that source transfer switch. It's 44 years old today. It'll be 48 years old when we replace it in 2028. I think we should pull that forward too. And that's a safety issue. If that thing didn't work and we needed it, it's a problem. That's a big problem. And then we could use the old one, just have it as a standby backup until it would never. Do you start those every 30 days?
Every week.
Every week? Okay.
Every Monday.
Okay.
So Chief, as far as backup for the public safety complex, what do you guys currently have? I guess I should, you have a generator, that's what I thought. So is Nate still here?
No, I think Nate left.
Yeah. From the electric utility standpoint, it's not an issue moving forward. It's more of a general fund issue that we have. And that's what was, instead of replacing the generator, that's why we came up with source transfer switch. So again, if we're moving it forward, it's just more of an item, particularly in 2025, maybe challenging, but if that's something the majority of the council wants to have on it. But the other thing in mind is I'd like to have Nate's commentary, because I believe the public safety complex is already fed from 2 different feeds from the electric utility as well. But we do have fairly good reliability for electric service and for our utility.
Well, is a source transfer switch, it's not a generator? Oh, okay. I thought it was a generator.
No.
Oh.
How I understand it is that if electricity is needed and it can't be pulled from direction A, it gets pulled from direction B, C, or D. I think that's
Oh,
how it is.
okay.
It's kind of like a valve.
Oh, I was under the impression it was a generator. Okay.
As Nate explained it, with being underground and the diesel plant and all the redundancy that we have, we don't need a generator. A switch like this will pull electricity from whichever direction it needs to come from.
Okay. All right.
Well, okay.
Gosh,
Any concerns with the police department? Safe to move on? Okay. Ambulance. Big items that we have here is just replacement of the ambulance that we have here. $210,000. We do have the Sprinter transfer ambulance that may be moved forward on this. It's about $200,000 again, but this would be an ambulance that would be dedicated for transfers as well. And then our final ambulance out there for replacement, and we'll have all three of them will be new, or at least for 237 in 2028. Are there any concerns with the ambulance CIP?
Just the reality that if you ordered that Sprinter tomorrow, you probably wouldn't have it until 2/26 or later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there is delay on these public safety vehicles as well,
I
so.
could order it tomorrow.
Okay. Let's go ahead, please. Library, the big item that we have is the condenser here. I still need to look in, there may be some minor adjustments with this budget. One of them is I need O'Mara a call back on the technology services upgrades as well. That's a relatively low item at $5,000 on it. But is there any concerns with the library budget? And then two, there may be an addition for technology services updates at the library, but I need to verify that with Mara. It's been some time looking at that one as well. It won't be material for the city's budget, so if there are, it'll be small. Okay. All righty.
If you don't get something in 8 seconds, move to the next.
Okay. I'll keep moving. All righty. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, no, I like to be generous with the
With
time.
the aquatics on this as well, the big item that we had, and it's somewhat new for us this year, is the sandblasting in the outdoor pool. And as Chandler explained, we are dealing with a leak issue too. So that item is not on the list, and we're gonna eventually have to address it as well. But are there any concerns with the aquatics CIP?
It's gotta be done.
Okay, let's go ahead. Athletics, and again, we have the soccer complex and the investment. What we heard last night is we want to have a work session and determine what we're going to do on this. And then also Mr. Kevin Voss had some excellent ideas that he communicated to me today. So when we have that policy and planning session, which we're going to try to have sooner than later, we're going to have Kevin and Jeanette and his team here, and we'll be talking about options for the soccer complex as well. Okay, let's go ahead, please. Golf, we just simply want to make sure council's aware that there are CIP projects at the golf course. The irrigation system is ways out, but the complete irrigation system replacement was $3.5 million. We have listed $900,000 here, and that'll be an issue that we will have to deal with sooner rather than eventually on that as well. Kevin also talked about the renovation of hole 18 that we have out here in 2018. The good news is we are building memberships up there. Kevin, how many memberships are we up to now?
101.
Yeah, 101. In prior 3 years, I want to say I don't think we cracked 30. Yeah, yeah. So there's been significant membership base. In fact, the subsidy that we have for the golf course is as low as I could remember it on as well. So I think it's moving in a positive direction. Unfortunately, it will need some investment in the future. So is there any questions or concerns with the golf course?
Well, I think that'll be on a work session too.
When we get to which one?
Well, the golf course. Well, when we talk about the soccer field and the golf course, or, no?
If council wants to talk about the golf course, we could certainly talk about it, but from staff standpoint, what we would try to do is continue to build up memberships, and as we get closer to these big projects.
Yeah.
Yeah, but if council, let me answer the question correctly. Any item could be a work session if council requested on it. So if council anytime wants to talk about the golf course and options and long-term repairs, we'd be more than happy to schedule it as a work session.
But for a facility that big, $35,000 is peanuts.
Well, compared to that 900,000 or
Yeah.
2 million or 3 million.
That's not really even keeping up with maintenance.
Okay.
All righty. Let's go ahead with the park improvements. Big item that we have here in the CIP, again, is the Charles S. Farver Park that we have. There's two components. We saw in the electric utility budget, $350,000 to bury the transmission lines that go across the old power plant site. And the plan is, once that portion is done, we're going to hand the baton off to community services and build the park. For those that were on council at the time, we talked about this park being really the showcase portion of South Pella, and we're hoping to have redevelopment plans on the south side of Oskaloosa Street on this, and this certainly would help. We also talked, once the park is complete, we'll likely have to increase the manpower for community services as well. The other big ticket items, and not big ticket items, is just the Central Park improvements. We heard Chandler talk about improvements to the sundial and the fountain as well. And then, of course, we're still dealing with the tulip torn too, and that'll be in front of council very shortly as well. So are there any concerns with the park CIP?
So
that big project, will that be a work session also?
The tulip torn?
No, the south end.
Yeah,
park.
we certainly can do that, yes.
Yeah, with all the other stuff, I guess I would put that way on a lower priority right now because of all the other stuff than Central Park.
Yeah, when we go to bury the transmission lines, that will be a capital improvement project, separate vote on that. When we build the park, separate vote, public improvement project. So there'll be two votes just on the construction of the project. If we issue any debt on it, that's the third. So it's the trifecta, and we can certainly hold a work session beforehand if you'd like as well.
And we'll see how it develops.
So is the dog park considered parks, or?
Yeah, that's a very good point, Mayor. Let's have that discussion. Thank you for reminding me.
I know it's in our
Yeah.
narrative outside of the budget, but as much discussion as there's been in my 4 years being around here, we have I think, a really good solution that all parties that are involved. So I think we need to make sure and get that done. I mean, they're coming with funding. So anyway, I just didn't see it. I don't know if it should be up here or not.
Well, we certainly, from staff's perspective, I'll explain the reason why we didn't put it in. The difference between this, I think we have Kiwanis Park coming up here too. The difference between Kiwanis Park is that group came in front of council, they had a proposal, and that was the direction we received from council, so we put it in. The dog park, we've actually been at this project for some time working. They've been very patient, but we didn't have that final, this is where the location is, this is what's being proposed, no overall direction. We certainly can put it in the budget. We do have funding in the local option sales and services tax fund. That's the funding source that we would have, and we'd be more than happy to put the project in the budget if you'd like. But we would also state is that group, we need to have another work session with that group and have an actual agreement in front that it'll be a separate work session, but so you've got two steps.
That's good. Yeah, let's do that. Have them come with their plan, and we can approve the expenditure at that time.
Have we done any exploration about the mandates of, since this will be on federal land? That was something that I'd be really interested in, having somebody bring the parameters of the difference between community land and federal land and maintaining thereof.
I would assume the Army Corps, at least the discussions I've had with the group, the Army Corps of Engineers, been supportive of it, so I would assume they would know what they can and can't do. But you're right, it looks to me like it's kind of gonna be a three-way agreement between the Army Corps of Engineers, the City of Pella, and then the private money that's coming in from the group. So I just want to get it done, if everybody's in agreement. I don't want to, I'm not taking a dog out there.
Okay.
A lot of people will.
Any other concerns with the park CIP? So we'll schedule the Pella Dog Park Association. That'll be a sooner rather than later one too. We'll get that in front of council as well. So, community services, let's hold off on the community center. We have a separate slide on the community center and indoor recreation center. So this is the memorial building of the Wonderspieling expansion and the Caldwell mini patch, which is 100% donor funded. Are there any concerns with the memorial building? And what I would say is would recommend on the memorial building and these facilities, that it may be wise just to at least have a discussion on the public use of the buildings and what we would do before we do that project. We could do it as part of the authorization for the memorial building and have that discussion on it, but it is a significant cost for it, and we want to make sure that we're talking anytime we have put these buildings at the public use, what public use is occurring in the buildings as well, so. Not that city administration, it's a valuable service to the VFW and American Legion, but when you look at the renovation of the community center, 215 Main Street, we want to make sure we're spending our resources wisely as well. So if there's no concerns with it, we'll just plan on at some point in time that project. It'll be a separate work session before we authorize it. So
Did we already approve the Wonderspielen expansion?
the Wonderspielen, we have a verbal on it direction, and we have a contract that's waiting to go in front of council on it as well. And what we wanted to do before presenting the contract, we wanted to get through this session, so it's waiting out there. But the formal approval hasn't, but we've got direction off that, so. Okay, let's go ahead. Electric utility, big items that we have are AMI, as well as that, I'd say, from my standpoint, it's a reliability issue. That North Plant East sub-bust high of $760,000 were the two big items that we have on the electric utility budget. Are there any concerns with proposed CIP for the utility? Okay, let's go ahead. Pellet Fiber, again, for their finances, we're a competitive utility. We'll be talking with this in council during closed session on rates on this as well. But the utilities of CIP, is there any concerns with the CIP for Pellet Fiber? Okay.
All the infrastructure, the line tending everything is done, paid for through the bond issue, but
yes,
we're all done with it. We're just operational now. No other major moving forward.
Our data center battery backup, but that's already.
Yep,
Yeah.
okay.
Last year's
Yeah.
budget, in fact, it shows up next week.
Yeah.
All right.
It's been a heck of an accomplishment, Mayor. I think safely to say you can mark a check mark on about 99.5% of things associated with Pellet Fiber, so that's.
Yeah, well, plus I remember the projected financial picture was 2,000 customers needed, and if we get to 3, it'd be a nice utility for the city of Pella.
True success story. Planning and zoning, again, we've approved the comprehensive plan. This is the zoning code update. I won't spend a lot of time on it, other than the fact I think it's very important this day and age when you get in the development process that your zoning code is updated. And I'm sensitive to those definitions in the zoning code, because just keep in mind when the developer walks in the door, what the rules are is what the rules are when the application goes on and is submitted to the city. And so it's subject to interpretation if you don't have clearly defined zoning use definitions, and that's going to be a big part of the zoning code, and also a good close examination, not close, but a review of the subdivision ordinance as well. So that's the one CIP item that we have for P&Z. Is there any concerns with that? Okay, City Hall, and again, we have the demolition of the Second Christian Reformed Church, as well as the Early Learning Center renovation. Is there any concerns with proceeding with these projects for City Hall? Okay. Water, we talked a lot this evening about the Jordan Well and also the RO system and the CIP, as well as future projects associated with the utility. Any concerns with the water CIP? Okay, let's go ahead. Wastewater, once again, we spent a lot of time talking about the lift station upgrades along with the street lining projects or the sanitary sewer lining projects on that as well. Any concerns with the sanitary sewer projects? Okay, let's go ahead. Road use tax, massive CIP on it, $11.7 million in 2025. Any concerns with the road projects that we have? Okay. Pelham Municipal Airport, we talked about two things. We talked about the need to continue to invest in the airport, that it's going to be used in taking care of some of these items. And we also stated that our goal is to come back in April and to have a work session on the regional airport in the direction of the Pelham Municipal Airport. We're going to try to stick to that on it as well. But is there any concerns with the proposed CIP for the Pelham Municipal Airport? Okay. All right, let's go ahead. Talk about the long-term facility plan that we have in the budget. We spent quite some time last night talking about the financial overview. We certainly can refer back to it. What the budget has is all three projects proceeding simultaneously on it. So the timing with these projects, again, a lot of the logistics will have to be worked out, but essentially the community center is on the same time frame as the indoor recreation center. Whether that occurs, that's ultimately up to the discretion of the council. The size and scale of these projects are also up to council as well. So for the three projects, what the FY25 budget has for the indoor recreation center, we have proposed expenditures of $2,577,000. The community center, $1,278,000, and the infrastructure associated with the indoor recreation center, and also to give a second access point to the Pella Sports Park is roughly $4.4 million. We talked last night, since the community center and the indoor recreation center share the same funding sources, the importance before we approve construction contracts to make sure the plan is fully funded on that, and we have a plan for both projects on a path forward, and that's simply because they share the same funding sources. So my question to council, is there any concerns with the budgetary allocations for the plan? And I'd like to remind you, you're not approving these projects. What you're simply approving is listing them in the city's capital improvement project. For all these projects, there is likely going to be 3 votes on it. For the indoor recreation center, and I'll state this, you'll have a vote on a construction contract, will be 1 vote. For a local option bond, there'll be a separate process to issue a bond. That will be a second vote on the project. You could say the same thing with the community center. The community center will have a vote on a construction contract, as well as a vote on a bond issue for the project. University Street, same thing. And before you even get to that point, there'll be separate work sessions on each one of these projects as well. So, Mayor, we'd like to know if there's any concerns with the budgetary allocations for the city's long-term facility plan.
Okay, that's 8 seconds.
Okay, I'm moving on.
Now we're going back to question 1.
We're going back to question 1, so if everyone's okay with that.
Question 1.
Okay.
So just as you were talking, I have a question. So the 55-cent proposed increase amounts to how much total property tax?
Brian, each 100,000 is about 15 cents, is that correct?
$15, wouldn't it be?
No,
15.
$100,000 to the budget is 15 cents on the levy, I think. Find it.
Okay, so 15 cents per 100,000.
Yep.
So
If you look at
just
property
for,
taxes, oops, sorry, Mayor.
no, that's the answer, 100,000.
Well, that's.
Every 15 cents of the levy raises $100,000.
$1,000, yeah. The impact we had on a $200,000 house currently for fiscal year '24 was $1,326. That would go up to $1,399, so that's what, $73.
Okay, so I'll throw this out for consideration. Again, I don't vote, so it's got to be you 6 that are. So if you recall, our total budget showed a operating surplus of $215,000, I believe.
291.
Or 201, or let's say 200,000.
Okay, all right.
So if we decided to go 25 cents instead of 75 cents, that would give us a balanced budget.
No,
No?
because you gotta remember, the 291,000 is spread across all operations. So that includes utilities,
Oh,
everything.
but I mean, a total balance, but.
That's our total, so that, you gotta look at the whole operation.
Mandy, why don't we go to just the general fund on
General
the,
fund has a surplus of $21,000,
Okay.
about, if I remember right, is what, I think that's what
Yeah.
we're at, is about, so the general fund essentially with the tax increase is balanced to about as close as you can
Right.
get, and
Yeah.
estimate it's had a slight increase. So
Yeah.
that 291 is across all operations.
Mandy, it was on last night's slide presentation before we started to go on the general fund. It's our bar graph, up for the general fund.
I thought it showed up as $87 on a graph we saw on a $200,000 house.
Well, that was, I think, the impact further on down of debt issuance was a range,
Okay,
I think.
But anyway, my comment was, as your assessment goes up, you can probably double that amount.
Well, let's answer that question. Mandy, I know I'm asking a lot. Could you go back to our assessment on the budget letter? I'll pick that one off first.
And Mandy, we're all wondering why you don't have all the slides memorized.
Okay. The question, let me walk through on the assessment. And I'm in the state, Iowa's tax laws, property tax laws are convoluted on this, and this is my own personal opinion. Property tax legislation, when you continue to add on to things and you don't fix or address the root problem that causes a lot of concerns, it keeps amplifying itself or magnifying itself. So this is a good example. For last year, when we had a home and those assessed values were based on January 1st, 2022, we've taken a typical home that was assessed at $200,000 on January 1st, 2022. Those property taxes were paid for fiscal year 2024. If you look at what happened in 2025, those are based off January 1st, 2023. And I know everyone's phones were ringing once they got their assessments. Most assessments in total went up 18%. That's a lot. But keep in mind, there's a difference between what your gross assessment is on your home and what you actually pay on property taxes. Right. The difference is called the residential rollback. In Iowa, residential properties are linked with agricultural properties. The increase in a residential property in the class as a whole cannot be greater than an ag property. So what you had in Iowa last year is residential properties going up 18, 20%, while ag values were down. What happens on the taxable valuations is in 2024, the rollback was at 54%, which means when you paid property taxes to the city, you paid on 54% of the value of your home. That's the only thing that counts is taxable valuations. Gross is nice, taxable is all that actually gets stuff done. So you paid 54%. In this current year that we have for 2025, you're gonna pay on 46% of your home because the rollback went down 15%. I know it's a little wonky math, but when you do it over, there's a big decrease in the rollback. So assessments went up 18% on your home. Class as a whole went down 15%. When you do the math and look at the taxable valuation, that $200,000 home in 2024, which is right now, would have paid taxable valuation on their home of $109,300. Next year, their assessed value is going to be $236,000, but guess what? When you multiply that by the 46% of the residential rollback, your taxable valuation is $109,362. That's less than 1% on it. So there's a lot of talk about the minimum assessments on it, but they didn't mean anything because most people's taxable valuations did not go up. And that's one of the challenges that we have is there's a lot of misperceptions on assessments and valuations and what actually gets paid on it. And I wish, that's my own plea on this is not questioning the property tax legislation. That's something at the state legislature, but this causes more confusion and concerns over here and unnecessary legislation in trying to address this on it. So from our standpoint, assessed valuations for most people on your residential homes did not go up on it. And so hence getting back to the increase going from 1020 up to 1075, most of the property tax increases on this 55 cents that is being proposed. There's not a separate assessment for most people.
And so I think the first sentence under the example says it best. Even though assessment went up 18%, actual taxable value went up 1%. So what you're saying has been eliminated. you're not getting, rise in assessments is not creating more property tax for anybody. Because the actual, I think that's maxed at 2%.
Or more revenue for the city.
Yeah.
Or, and if you think, the reason that the city of Pella for 22 years has not had to raise taxes is because of this, because of rising valuations, and you paid tax. The rollback varied a little bit, but there was more revenue available on existing homes because they kept rising in value, the assessed value, so the taxable value, so it generated more. If this new legislation hadn't happened and assessments would have went up 18%, we wouldn't be talking about a tax rate increase because it would have went up naturally with the increased value that is taxed. And so, yeah, whether, the Iowa legislature gets yelled at a lot about property tax, and so this is what they did, and so we're gonna have to live, we have to live with this moving forward.
Now, we're gonna get yelled at.
Yeah. But the reality of it is, we're in a, 4.5% inflationary, everything we do as a city is costing more. We have a lot less room for property tax based on valuation. Yeah.
In my 24 years of doing this, a 9% swing in the rollback is probably one of the largest I can remember. There might have been one in the late 2000s, but what the mayor was saying is typically the rollback one year would go up to 2.5%, the next year would go down to 2.5%.
Yeah.
It was it had some curves to it, but it was fairly stable until about 2015 when all these property tax reforms started diverging things. You started creating a multi-residential class, which created some issues there, which is now gone because it's now merged back into the residential class. And now with last year's, you're going to see predictable, I believe you're going to see more wider swings in this rollback from year to year. It's going to you're not going to have those nice, when you look at a long-term, somewhat stable rollback, even though it's going up and down, the general trend was down, but it was a much more manageable shift from year to year. Like I said, I can't remember a swing this big in a given year, except for maybe one, and then they had made some changes, but 9% is a really huge.
Now, you can see it right there in the 4 years of history before 2025.
Yeah, I mean,
Barely.
you were doing that. You were starting to get a little bit bigger swings, but nothing like that.
Yeah.
So it was manageable.
So what's gonna happen next year?
Well, it depends. I think there's rules in place now, right? It depends what your valuations increase.
Well, every other year is
Well, there's nothing that addresses this in this legislation. And I don't mean to be feeling passionate about it, I just know this causes a lot of confusion, it causes a lot of question, a lot of just.
Did you guys get your property tax? It means nothing.
Almost.
I don't know. You couldn't figure that out in 5 days looking at it.
2023 was a reassessment year, so 2024, you're not going to see much change in valuations from a state level, because the only major changes you'll see is if you bought or sold your house, they'll reestablish your market value. If you made additions, things, so we're kind of in that off year, because the state or the assessor reevaluates, I believe it's every other year they have to have a reevaluation of areas, and then they try to get back to the market value. So I don't think when they release the values of 21, 23, or 4, you're going to see as big of a thing that you saw last year with 18%.
Yeah, this is the reason why when we looked at the general fund projection, if you recall, we said we'd do 3 years, but that third year is questionable. It's for these reasons. My take on this is, on these reassessment years, as long as there's a housing supply shortage, housing prices are going up, and then it really just depends on the price of corn and beans and how ag property gets valued. That determines the rollback. But again, it's just, you have to deal with it. It's in front of us, we have to deal with it. But as far as that assessed valuation, if that property assessed valuations, taxable valuations would have went up 18%, we wouldn't be talking about a tax rate increase.
Yeah.
So let me say this about rates, and then I'll be done. You guys need to discuss, because you have to make the call. I think, so with the information that Brian gave us, so for every 15-cent tax increase, we're talking $100,000. Our general operating shows a surplus of $21,000. So if you want to think about if you want to cut this rate every 15 cents, would take away it'd put us into a debt. Now, last year we had a budget that had a deficit spending of $500,000. We had the balance, right? So I think we still probably have some balance that we could spend down. So that would be an option, to go whatever rate, either none or more, but realizing that based on the current budget, it's going to cause spending down of the fund balance. The other thing I think there's potential this could be, and again, based on that discussion, we don't know what the legislature is going to do for sure, but the other thing that could affect our city rate is the essential services tax, because as we've had it explained pretty well, the majority of our tax increase is due to the ambulance. It's two things, the ambulance and then property insurance going crazy. But with the essential services tax, if it were to pass, let's say it's a 50-cent tax, we could, and we did check this out, we could reduce our levy by that amount because the citizens of Pella are already paying the essential services tax. So if the essential services tax passes and we could reduce our levy by that amount, the essential service, and where we are going to end up gaining in that situation is, and this is where the distribution of that tax is critical, and we're holding the line in Pella saying we want all the tax generated to go back to where it was generated to pay for that service. So where we would gain is we would get the rural area that we service, we would get that tax. So that would be additional revenue for us through that essential services tax. We could reduce our city levy rate.
There's two
maybe.
savings there potentially.
Yeah, potentially, maybe. So I like to, I said I was a little depressed last night, but this is one thing that I think that I see a tax rate, and again, anything can happen, but I see maybe this is a temporary thing until that happens is going to help us. And the other thing that I think, to me anyway, this just indicates how important it is for us to continue to invest and attract development, because that's for the long term, like I say, we used to benefit from just valuation increases. That's not going to happen anymore. So our only way to generate more property taxes, it's going to cost us more and more to operate the city, is to create a larger tax base. So any of these projects that are going to help with development, we bring online new houses, new commercial development, that's going to help us with our keep our tax rate as low as possible and still fund the services of the city. And we have a wonderful city. You think about our swimming pools and our parks and everything, our library and our sports park and all of that. The citizens of Pella expect high quality amenities in this community. And so if we want to continue to provide those under the current financing structure, we simply have to continue to grow our tax base. So That's my,
I would say that this situation, we should be publishing that in that monthly letter or a special letter in that example, because we need to educate our constituents of why the rate is going up. It's because basically the assessed valuation is flat. Has been held flat.
That's a good idea.
And so we really need to let people know how that gets figured, because it is complicated. It's remarkably complicated, but that's what I would suggest that, and I think we can do that.
I think to your point earlier, John, about John said, everybody was yelling at the state, now everybody's yelling at the city.
Yeah.
My personal opinion, I've always been the kind of guy, give me all the medicine at once. I'm not gonna try and nibble on it and take it in bites. I'd rather take it all, and then if we have benefits, as opposed to looking at, well, we do a little here or a little there, I'm gonna have to get yelled at multiple times. I'd rather just take the heat all at once.
well, the question that has to be answered tonight is what is this group gonna support on April 2nd for a tax rate?
I'm in support of this for what I just said.
I'm a yes.
Yeah, I think I'm a yes.
Yep.
As much as I hate it.
Reluctantly, yes.
Yeah.
Reluctant, yes.
Yeah.
That's the April newsletter. There's your subject right there.
John already wrote it.
John's got
So
it.
I have the May one, but it's gotta be about tulip time.
Oh, that's true.
We could, Mandy,
Time's over, Don.
not when mine will come out May 1st.
We have tulips out.
I have October, that's
Tulip time's in 2
please.
weeks, John.
It's gotta be about, I'm sorry, it's gotta be about tulip. But we can do something else. We can do something else.
What's that?
Could we write an insert?
Yeah, Mandy will get something.
Oh, okay.
She's a wizard with that newsletter. She'll get it. Okay, so what I heard is that this will be supported, and then we can get the budget process done. And obviously, we're gonna have a lot of other discussions about projects and what we're gonna fund and how we're gonna do moving forward.
Oh, yeah.
So, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you to everyone.
I said to John, we all need to carry that letter around with us, make sure we can grocery store.
You aren't gonna wear a badge saying I voted yes?
No, I'd have to have a ribbon on the bottom saying, and here
You'd
it
have to have one
was.
of their armored vests.
All right, Mike, anything else from you?
What I would like to do, the mayor, is I'd like to thank a few people in the room. I'd like to thank Brian for enduring through this process. This was a challenge. I know Brian has a lot of years of experience, but this is his first year of City Appellate, did a bang-up job. Vivian has been invaluable through these processes, keeps all these financial reports streaming. So Vivian, thank you. And I'd also like to thank Mandy for the work that she did on the budget documents. As you know, Mandy is invaluable to the city of Pella. And finally, I'd like to thank the city staff for the work that they've done on this. This was not an easy process. And my last thank you is to the city council. Thank you for the leadership that you provide our community. So.
Okay, well, we're not quite done. I assume council has said what you want to say. Anything else? Still have to give opportunity for any member of the public to express ideas or other comments to the council. So if you want to do that, the podium is there. Please go there, state your name, address. Please try to limit your comments to 3 minutes. All right, seeing none, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Hopkins, Carlstone, all in favor, please say yes, opposed no. Mandy, please call the roll.
Yes.
Carlstone?
Yes.
Dan Stryland?
Yes.
DeYoung?
Yes.
Randall Gorst?
Yes.
Buck?
Yes.
We are adjourned.